Greetings, family. This is your brother Asar Imhotep coming to you once again. An informative lecture / presentation that I hope that you and the rest of the listening audience will find to be very valuable. Today's focus is going to be on three principal issues. And that is the definition and meaning of the word Kemet, which is one of the ancient names for Egypt, the Ankh and the Ankh symbol. And then lastly, I added this at last minute, which is kind of why I'm starting a little late today, by 6 minutes, it looks like on my time. Because I was putting together some information from a larger work that I'm doing on Kemet itself. And this is going to be on the section in the meaning of the word punt. So we'll be dealing with three things today: punt, the Ankh symbol, and the name Ankh, as well as the word Kemet. Now, this presentation was put together last minute. It's really kind of a conglomerate of some of my notes from previous articles and works that I'm working on currently. But a brother out of, I believe he's out of London, Anitio Shabazz. I hope I'm saying his name right. I've never met him personally, but we've corresponded over the years over Facebook. I agreed a very long time ago, and I don't even remember the exact time, to do a presentation on the word Kemet. And I guess it came up more recently in another Facebook forum, and he was reminded of my promise. And he sent me a message asking me, or tagged me in a message asking me when I was actually going to do it. So I told him this Friday, which is today, that I would do it. And so I'm keeping to my word. So this is for you, Brother Shabazz. I've written a text already on the meaning of Kemet, and there was actually a response to a debate I was having on the Egypt Search forum. And so I wrote a response to the questions in the forum, but there is going to be a more formalized and systematized article or book, actually, on Kemet, its meaning, and then these other things that I'll be dealing with as well in that particular text. So the notes are going to be kind of conjumbled, but hopefully they will still make sense to you. I've already written on the concept of the Ankh, but I'm adding a little bit to it because that is going to be updated in a future work. And there is some linguistic discoveries in which I have to incorporate in my analysis on the meaning of Ankh. So you'll get a taste of it today. You won't get it in full. But there is a lot to cover, and also dealing with punt. And so I'm going to be dealing with punt in the publication on Kimet on two aspects. One, dealing with its meaning, and then two, dealing with its location and the evidences for that. So that is in the future. And today I'm only going to be dealing with the linguistic aspect. And so there is even much more than what I'm going to be presenting today in that larger discourse, but given the sake of time. So I appreciate everyone for coming in and listening. And please, if you have any questions, hit me up towards the end, because I probably won't be looking at the chat anytime soon, but we will keep this thing going. And I'm going to start the presentation in just a few seconds. So I have to, the way my setup works, because of the memory and things, I have to work off of 2 computers. So y'all will hear me on this computer, but I'll be actually doing the presentation from another computer. And so I'm going to switch there, and hopefully that data comes up. I need to, okay, my screen is trying to go to sleep on me because I took too long to respond. And so, you know, got to bear with me for a second as I deal with these technical difficulties. And, okay, what is the problem over here? I forgot that I have to share my screen on the other computer. So I'm about to share the entire screen. And so I have to wait a second and see if the screen comes up. So now I see it. So I'm gonna check the chat, but I won't be in the chat as often. Hotep people, peace, Sister Monica, peace, Brother Sean P, Lessa Darcy, peace to you, Matt Tip, and others who are, you know, Imiket Aku, Kinshaya Akinyi. I know I'm murdering that name, but peace to you and everyone who is listening but not in the chat at the moment. And so, okay, so now I see my screen. And so now we will get started as soon as my, at the moment, screen starts. My phone stops its chats. And high five to you, Sister Monica. She loves the high five. Okay, so now that I've done enough rambling and getting my stuff together, we can begin this lesson. So as mentioned earlier, the title of this presentation is called The Meaning of Kemet, the Ankh, and Punt. It is subtitled The Vitality of the Bantu Languages. And you may be familiar with that concept of Bantu based on the concept of, now why is my HP trying to do pop-ups in the middle of my presentation? So this way you got to disable all of these background applications because they be messing with your presentation. So here we go. Sorry for the interruption, but here we go again. So yeah, so we'll be talking about the vitality of the Bantu languages. And you're familiar with the concept of Bantu by the word Bantu or Bantu, which is in linguistics, a designation for a language family, but also it is within that language family, Bantu is a word meaning people that seems to be spread throughout that entire language family. So we'll be utilizing the Bantu languages, and we're going to expand our concept of the Bantu languages in a very unique and creative way that will bring some particular context to what it is that we're doing. And so there's this concept that I like to, that I like to deal with called alluja. And alluja is a Chiluba Bantu word meaning to make, provide, or to retrace one's steps. to refer to a place of origin, to restore. And it is my objective in my research, especially dealing with African people in general, but the relationship between Bantu and ancient Kemet in particular, to restore the fundamental meanings and spirit behind the concepts which have kind of been stripped in the Egyptological literature due to a fundamental difference in worldviews and approaches to African phenomena. And so in ancient Egypt, this was called Saruj. And the essence Saruj is a causative prefix, the root being rouge, which means to make secure, to set right a wrong, provide a full, hold on one second. Okay. Provide a full, provide and fulfill a contract, to restore, to repair, to make new again, to make and grow, and to make flourish. So we're going to let the ancestors speak on the concepts in which we're talking about today, and restore them back to their original essence, utilizing the Intu languages. The stress on the Intu is, as I stated earlier, going to be apparent in a little bit, but I want to give a little context for why I deal with Intu, and fundamentally why I associate the ancient Egyptian culture and language with the Intu languages. Now, the concept of a Bantu classification for languages actually comes from this gentleman who you see on your screen by the name of Wilhelm Henrik Emanuel Bleek, who they're not sure the exact specific date, but at least by 1863, he used the term Bantu to designate the quote unquote Bantu languages, because he noted that all of the languages in Central and South Africa use the stem Intu to refer to person or man. And so when he was doing his travels and learning the languages of South and Central Africa, again, he noticed that there's this common word that they all shared, Bantu or Muntu in the singular, in its various different forms. And so this was the beginning of a clue that all of these languages in these areas must be related somehow. And so when he was a professor of linguistics, and after studying for a while and doing the necessary works in terms of capturing the sound meaning correspondences, he officially labeled them as a language classification. And of course, when you classify something, you give it a name. And so that name was Bantu. Now, Bantu is usually associated with a language family created by Joseph Greenberg, which is called Niger-Congo. And the argument is that the Bantu languages are very young, and that they started spreading anywhere between 3000 and 1000 BCE to its current locations, allegedly from the borders of Cameroon and Nigeria. So that is supposed to be the homeland of the Bantu-speaking people. And from there, they spread into Central Africa, East Africa, and Southern Africa. And so that is the running hypothesis in the mainstream African linguistics. Now, you usually hear me talk about, Theophilo being in his language classifications in other lectures. And so this may be a repeat for some. But I want to give, again, a little context for how I'm going to be shaping this particular lecture. So bear with me again. So on the strength of this language classification, which is Niger-Congo, Joseph Greenberg categorize other African languages as well. And they are called Nilo-Saharan, Khoisan, and Afro-Asiatic. Now, before then, there was a great number of languages, and Greenberg reduced them to 4 so-called large language families, or phylums, as they have been known to be called. And so, as a result of these classifications through a method called the mass comparison, Greenberg, in his Afroasiatic family, argued that the ancient Egyptians, the Berbers, and the Semites were Caucasian people, and that the origin of Afroasiatic essentially lied somewhere in Europe or the Middle East. And who I have on the screen here is Dr. Theophilo Obenga, who is a Egyptologist and a linguist out of Central Africa, more so specifically Congo, Brazzaville. And he found issue, him and Cheikh Diop, a great Senegalese scholar, a linguist, physicist, and Egyptologist. And one could also argue a political and economic scholar as well. They looked at the data and the arguments made by Greenberg and some of his followers, and fundamentally disagreed with it, and started challenging this notion of an Afroasiatic language family. And so Afroasiatic is supposedly a language phylum that includes Berber, Semitic, Ancient Egyptian as its own branch, Chadic, Omatic, and the Cushitic languages. And so it was later argued that the Berber, Egyptian, and Semitic belong to the same parent within that family. And some people tried to argue that the Semitic gave birth to ancient Egyptian. Well, looking at the data systematically, Theophilo Obenga disagreed. And in this book, which we see written here, which is The Common Origin of Ancient Egyptian, Coptic, and the Modern Black African Languages, an introduction to the African historical linguistics, he set out to dismantle this notion of an Afroasiatic language family, and more specifically that the Semitic languages have anything to do with the ancient Egyptian. So he created, based on the data that he was using, his own phylum, his own language family called negro-Egyptian, or Black Egyptian, which incorporated the Egyptian language and Egyptian languages, Cushitic, Chadic, Nilo-Saharan, Niger Kordofanian, which is Niger Congo. And he separated Khoisan and he separated Berber out as its own language family. And he doesn't even include Semitic in the African languages. And so this was a monumental step. However, he got rid of the Afroasiatic, but he kept the Niger Congo, Nilo-Saharan families. However, for the same reasons that Afroasiatic doesn't work, is the same reasons that Niger Kordofanian and Nilo-Saharan don't work. None of these languages have been constructed based on the systematic and regular correspondences necessary to argue for a language family. And so Obenga's focus was simply Afroasiatic, but he didn't use the same criteria for Niger Congo and Nilo-Saharan, which he included in his negro-Egyptian. And because he was all over the place with his negro-Egyptian, there was still some work that needed to be done for that. And so out comes Jean-Claude Mboli about 20 years later with his 2010 work called The Origin of African Languages. And in this, he builds off of Obenga's 1993 work, which we just saw, and he actually goes through the necessary steps that Obenga didn't do, to validate the Negro-Egyptian language family. And so what he discovered is that the Negro-Egyptian language family was built off of 10 onomatopoeia words. I have other lectures, and you can get my book Nesubiti, and I go into the details, so I won't get into the details here of this. But from these 10 onomatopoeia words, the language was born for the archaic Negro-Egyptian speakers. And what we see here on this screen here is his reconstruction map and what he discovered. And so I want y'all to kind of pay attention to this very closely. And for those who were watching not live, you know, you can pause and study this, you know, at your own pace. But the Negro-Egyptian as reconstructed by Mboli has 3 stages, diachronic or historical stages, to the development of this family. So you have Negro-Egyptian archaic, where those monosyllabic 10 onomatopoeia words, you know, are, you know, being utilized and formalized into the language. And then when things start to formalize a bit and some time has passed, 3 fundamental branches develop, or dialects. And branch 1 becomes what he calls Kweke, Kweke. And the other, branch 2, is Kikwe, Kekwe, and the group Kikuki. And I'll explain these things in a little bit. But notice that the Kweke and Kikwe are the same syllables, but in the reverse. That is because these monosyllabic consonant vowel words that were created in the Negro-Egyptian archaic stage, in this stage here, which is called Negro-Egyptian classic, or classic Negro-Egyptian, in this classic stage, which is these 2 rows here, these they start to be fixed, because in this stage here, the first stage, archaic, you know, you can take any one of those monosyllabic words and put them in any order and they would work. Well, in stage 2, Negro-Egyptian or classic Negro-Egyptian, these syllables began to be formalized and they kept to a certain formula. So we have Kweke as this syllable structure, and then we have Kikwe as this syllable structure here. However, in group 3, the Kikuki, it did not have the same syllable structure that we see here. And so as more time passed and these different dialects and languages started to spread out, they spread out, but they were still interacting with each other. And so the languages went through a process of what we call convergence. And that's because they're trading, marrying with each other, warring, whatever the case may be, but they're interacting. And the more they're interacting and doing business and trading and marrying one another, the more they're borrowing vocabulary and grammar from each other, and the more their languages start to mirror each other, to where it seems like it's a common language, like it's a new language being developed. And through that stage, when that starts to happen, this is now the beginning of what we call Negro-Egyptian post-classic. And so from this post-classic stage, the 3rd and final stage of Negro-Egyptian, 2 major dialects and branches emerge, which Mboli calls Bere and Biher. And again, the syllable structure is going to become very important. So we see these 2 words here, dialect Bere and Biher. These are both words for liver. But in the dialect Bere, it is consonant, vowel, consonant, vowel. And then in dialect Biher, it is consonant, vowel, vowel, consonant. And so the way that the words are structured in these 2 different branches are fundamentally different, and then they have serious consequences for the way that words are pronounced and how words are evolved in the system. It's a great more detail. I won't get into it, but we note here that, you know, with the languages that he studied to reconstruct Negro-Egyptian, we have Hausa, Zande, Middle Egyptian as part of the Bede branch, and then we have Coptic, Songo, and Somali as part of the Bahir branch. This is a fundamental deviation because in mainstream Egyptology, they argue that the Coptic language is the last stage of the Egyptian continuum. Well, he discovered that Middle Egyptian and Coptic are actually two separate branches from the same fundamental parent, and that the Middle Egyptian speakers and the Coptic speakers both met up in Egypt and was living amongst each other. And only in the latter stage do you get a written form of what, you know, we know as the Coptic language. But the classical language, Old Egyptian and Middle Egyptian, is one group of people, while New Kingdom, Demotic, and the Coptic or whatnot is a totally different group of people. That's a different discussion. I deal with that in the Nesubiti book. So we'll move on from here. With that said, this is another classification. This is the classification of Negro-Egyptian post-classic, so the third stage. So as I mentioned again, the Bede and the Bahir branches, you can see the difference in the syllable structure. You know, for example, Aka, Ata versus Aak, Aat in the Bahir branch. Notice that the vowels, you know, are different in terms of their placement and location in these words. And they again come to signify these particular, the way that words are constructed in these particular languages. And so in the Bede branch, we have Middle Egyptian, Hausa, Zande, and Mande languages. And then in the Bede, a second branch of the Bede dialect is Gabaya and Proto-Bantu. This is going to be important. And then in the Bahir branch, we have Nuer, which is in Sudan, Wolof, Coptic, Songo, which is in Central Africa, Congo, Zerma, Bandi, and the Somali on the Somali coast. All of these have similar word structures and grammar, which is significantly different from the Bede branch, you know, coming over here on this left-hand side. And so, but what's unique here is that the Bantu, the Proto-Bantu language, the languages here, actually is closer to Negro-Egyptian post-classic in general. It's going to become important later. Now, what I propose is there's going to be, what I propose here is the renaming of Negro-Egyptian. And we'll get to the reasons for that. My renaming of Negro-Egyptian is what I suggest is called Kimet.t. And Kimet.t means fundamentally family into, or the into family. Now, this Kimet.t is actually coined by Dr. Mube Binge Bololo out of the Congo, who deals a lot with the Chiluba Bantu language, and which is his native language, and the ancient Egyptian languages. And so what he fundamentally argues is that ancient Egyptian belongs to a great Ethiopian or Kimet.t family. However, Mubabingi Bilolo is not involved in the total reconstruction of a language family. He, like Obinga, you know, has all of the fundamental evidence, but hadn't gone through the steps of actually reconstructing scientifically the language family. And so that is something that Mboli did. And what I'm doing now, but Mboli didn't change the name Negro-Egyptian that Obinga created. He kept the same name. And so what I'm proposing here is that we rename the family Kimet.t for the following reasons, which we'll get to in a second. But Kimet is a word meaning, you know, object. It comes from a root ena, and a chi is a prefix. You know, object belonging to or family member of, owner, possessor, who has. one who is responsible for, manufacture, sales. It means originating from, characterized in, having the quality of. Other variants of the inner root is buena or buena, meaning master, lord, or owner, which is neb in ancient Egyptian, which is the inverse of that term. And so you have buena, family members taken collectively, ownership, possession, quality of, nationality, in the manner of, and as. And so when we talk about Chiena into, we're talking about that which originates from into, that which has the quality of into, is a family member or the family in general of into, the into family, Chiena into. And when we talk about Chiena into, we're not just talking about the language itself, but we're talking about an encompassing of everything that belongs to the quote unquote into world. That means its language, its thought, religion, culture, and its physical environment, which is of course encapsulated in the language. And so when speaking of Bantu as a sub branch of Chiena into, I prefer to call it Chi-Bantu or Ki-Bantu to make sure that there's a distinction. So when I say Chi-Bantu or Ki-Bantu, you know that I'm talking about the Bantu languages as a sub-branch of Chiena into. Now, the reason why I have to go through the construction route in terms of understanding the worldview of the into family and how all of this even relates to ancient Egyptian, I take an example from Mallory and Adams in their book, The Oxford Introduction to Proto-Indo-European and the Proto-Indo-European World. Now, this is a book that deals with the reconstruction of the Proto-Indo-European language family. And so what they say from the beginning of this text is that there is only one route to the reconstruction of Indo-European culture that offers any hope of reliability, and that is language. Although we might compare cultural traditions, behavioral, material culture among the different Indo-European groups, this exercise would be a very uncertain plunge into comparative ethnography or archaeology, and we would be forced to compare peoples at vastly different time depths. So even the Indo-Europeanists understanding that if we want to reconstruct the culture of Indo-European people, we have to reconstruct the language. So reconstructing the languages is synonymous with reconstructing the culture in their worldview. And so this is why the work of Obinga and Mboli is very important, because through negro-Egyptian, which I'm now calling Chiena into, from Dr. Bilolo, or inspired by Dr. Bilolo, is because they have not only reconstructed the words, but the worldview, the overarching worldview and thought patterns that permeate throughout all of the Negro-Egyptian speakers. And so this is going to be important into why we are able to use into languages, by into, in general, but the into or Negro-Egyptian more specifically, to answer fundamental questions of ancient Egyptian words, like the word Kemet, or like the word Ankh, or like the word Punt. And so the reason why I'm saying Chiena into over Negro-Egyptian is for several reasons. First, Negro-Egyptian, or the word Negro, equals black and is a color designation. And in scientific categorizations, using so-called racial nomenclatures is very problematic, because the concept of race is, at the current moment, scientifically unsound. And I understand completely why Theophilo Obinga named the family Negro-Egyptian, because of, again, what the the analysis of Greenberg, arguing that, and again, here goes Hewlett Packard wanting to interrupt my screen again with these ridiculous support pop-up windows. And so, excuse me while I wait on so-called health analysis being performed on my computer. This is what I get for just starting the computer. Okay, so let me go back. And so again, I understand why Theophilo Obenga did it is because the early Egyptologists and linguists were trying to argue that ancient Egypt was a European enterprise, that it was some Caucasian folks who came from Asia, came into Africa, civilized the Africans, and created ancient Egyptian civilization. It is under that constant bombardment in the literature for why, when Theophilo Obenga suggested the negro-Egyptian language family, that he took a bold political move and called it Black Egyptian, and to remind the world that the ancient Egyptians were Black in color. And so, but, you know, in this day and age, we have to be more scientific in our analysis. And, you know, this concept of negro-Egyptian is, you know, causing a lot of, you know, banter, so to speak, in the academic circles, you know, because they can't seem to negro-Egyptian, although the label is political, the family itself is not. It's done based on a scientific analysis of languages. And so to not even deal with that, Km.t serves as a better name, in my opinion, you know. And so also, at least here in the United States, Negro or negro is pejorative. So if you in this day and age call somebody a Negro, you're not calling them, you know, something that is highly praised or something to this nature. It is used as a derogatory term. And so this is fundamentally one of the reasons why people have problems with the word or the phrase Negro-Egyptian, because Negro has a negative connotation in the English-speaking world. And so thirdly, Negro-Egyptian is often confused with the actual Egyptian language. And so, you know, when I tell folks about Negro-Egyptian, they're thinking ancient Egyptian language and not understanding that it is the family designation for which the ancient Egyptian languages belong. And then when you start arguing that Coptic is an ancient Egyptian language, but it's different from Middle Egyptian, and then you're talking about Negro-Egyptian, then it adds another layer of confusion. So Km.t eliminates that confusion. And, you know, so again, the Bantu languages, this is the fourth reason here, the Bantu languages are closer to Negro-Egyptian than to Negro-Egyptian post-classic than all the other branches. And therefore, it is a better representative of the parent language that gave birth to both the Beher and the Bere, and I had that in reverse, the Bere and the Beher branches of Km.t. Now, Proto-Bantu essentially is Negro-Egyptian post-classic. And so when you think about the Bantu languages are really a continuum of Negro-Egyptian post-classic. The Bantu languages preserve the more archaic features of Negro-Egyptian languages than all of the other language families, which is why the stress on Ntu and the Ntu languages when trying to answer ancient Egyptian questions is fundamental. And so there's certain things that you really can't do and really can't solve without the inclusion of the Bantu languages. And so this will become clear later on. And so here's a map coming from Mboli showing the two branches of Negro-Egyptian post-classic. And on the left-hand side is the Bere branch. And so we see here, coming from a common origin in the Great Lakes region, the Bantu the Chi-Bantu and Ki-Bantu languages. And then we have what we call Para-Bantu, which is your Middle Egyptian, Bambara, Hausa, Zande languages, all part of the Beri branches. So they're all into. The major deviation comes in the Beher branches, but they all come from the same region as well. And so Beher becomes Sango, Somali, Zerma, Wolof, Nuer, and the Luo languages, which all have been studied in his 2010 Origin of African Languages work. Now, there's some who argue, for example, Alfred Minmanyara, if I'm saying that correctly, who in 1992 wrote a book called The Restatement of the Bantu Origins. And he argues that the Bantus, were in ancient Egypt, but they originate in Sudan and migrated south into their current locations. Now, I bring this up because there is some oral literature that supports that argument. And this is cited in Dr. Kimbwadinde Kiabonseki Fukiao's work, Self-Healing Power and Therapy. And it comes from an original work called, from a person called Babu Tidi, in a text called Bantu Migration and Settlement, which is originally written in Kikongo. And it was cited in 1914 in Le Mans Congo Cultural Collection, which is on microfilm in Sweden. And this is the translation into English from the Kikongo. It says, and it's talking about the Bantu people, the Kikongo speaking people. A long time ago in antiquity, people did not exist in this lower Congo. They come from the north of the country. They're also in the north. People came from far off north. So we came further north, and then those ancestors, their ancestors came from even further north, the very north of Kayinga. Kayinga is the name of the country where lived our ancestors in antiquity. There, they already knew how to weave the cloths they wore, forge hoes, and knives that they used. The main reason for their coming to this country was the famine that hit Kayinga. For many years, the drought reigned. Crops and fruit trees they had planted dried up. They suffered a lot for this. Unable to support the suffering, they said to each other, let's go to Banda and Putu. Let's pass through the dense forest, the unbreakable wall, and organize chieftaincies, because we have a lot of hunger up here. This is important because Kayinga is the Sahara Desert. And if we go back to that map, if I can go back, there we go, to the restatement of the Bantu, you would see that they would have had to have passed the Sahara Desert and then going through like Chad or whatnot into the Congo, into the current areas in which they are now. Now, remember, this was written in 1914. So this is no Egyptologist or nobody's coming to inspire them to say that they, came from Kayinga. This is part of their oral tradition. And so what is possible is that these Bantu speakers who originated here migrated up into the Sahel belt. And during the time, when the Sahara was green, and when the Sahara started to dry again and people started to spread into Egypt and into West and South and Central Africa, these were part of that group based on that, the desertification and the droughts that were happening, who pushed themselves, eventually and settled, where the great rivers are. So everybody who spread out of here spread along and settled near great rivers. So some moved over here in the Niger and the Benue River. Some didn't stop until they hit the Congo rivers. Some didn't stop till they, they just continued on along down the Nile. And some later on even moved down into the Zambezi, and the Orange rivers. Everywhere there's a large and major river, that's when they stopped in those particular areas. So, and I don't have time to go into it now, but, this is how you would say or write Kayinga in the ancient Egyptian, language. You can pause that. We'll deal with that later. And so, the concept of into is, again, the encompassing, the embodiment of the total worldview. And what I argue, I created this concept called Bwalu Bwaintu, which is the Chiluba Bantu way of saying ontology. And it's the word into, which means being, existence, that we get the word ontos from in Greek, where we get the word ontology from. So when you say ontology, the study of what exists, or what is being, that word in ontos, comes from Greek, but that comes from the African languages. There's no Indo-European origin for this term. And what I argue is that this word is a borrowing from Egyptian, from this word here, Winju or Onjos, and this j sound here merged later on in the New Kingdom and late kingdoms into a T sound. So that's why they say ontos, because the W's in ancient Egyptian turn into O's in Greek. So ontos or onto, and then the Greek suffix os, the masculine suffix, onto. It means things, to beings, form, stuff like that. It could refer to people, goods, anything. That's what this term means, and we'll get back to that. But in the into languages, the suffix is just into. And here's that word into, again, in Chikam or ancient Egyptian. And so in the T form, it's those who. It means man, saying those who exist. And it's a third person singular pronoun, if I'm not mistaken. It became grammaticalized. But the indigenous form of the word into, as I mentioned before, in Chikam is this form here, onju or onjo, onto, onto, that you find in what's the name. So it means people, men, women, society, folk. And then budge here means things, as we mentioned earlier. And so the word into itself, coming from the BLR database, means entity, anything, any entity or some entity, some form, some being, some reality. And in Chiluba, it's a nominal thing, meaning human being, object, or place. It's any phenomenon is into. And these are the variations that you find in the Chiluba Bantu language. I won't go through these. You can go through these on your own time. But it's fundamental here. And I'm going through all of this only because this word into is a variant of the word Ankh. And we'll get to that later. But I want to give some context first. And so why, the word into and Chiena into, why I'm using it, as well as setting you up for the word Ankh. But in Chiena into a negro-Egyptian, Mboli gives this breakdown for the form of into. Now, as I mentioned in previous lectures, the word for human being in Chiena into or negro-Egyptian comes from a word meaning tree. And it is made up of these two syllables here, kiku or kuki in the reverse. And, this ki means branch and this ku means base. But when combined together, it means trunk or tree in general. And it became the word for body and then the word for person. The bark itself became a word for skin. But the same word for tree is the same word for skin, body, and person in Negro-Egyptian. And so from this agent prefix here comes, is ni kiku, then ni kihu, then ni kihu, then ni kiwu, then ni chiwu, and then inchu, or into. And so this is where we get the word into from. And so the two in into is a reduction of kiku. And so ki is where we get the T from, and ku is where we get the U from. And the N in into is this agent prefix, and this also means human being or person. And so it's a word for person that was grammaticalized. And so from ni or kiku, comes into. And so now that semantics we can see in ancient Egyptian with this word hau, which means flesh, limbs, body, and self, but also has a variant meaning staff. You can see the tree or stick determinative here. So the same word here designating the body and the self designate this doesn't mean tree, but it's more specialized now into staff, which of course is made from trees and tree branches. And so the same fundamental semantics exists in ancient Egyptian. And so this is what I'm talking about by that into worldview, that into way of thinking. When you study the other into languages, you'll see the same thought processes and correspondences in ancient Egypt. And so, I'm gonna move on to the main aspect of our discussion. So allow a number of us to get into the conversation. I just want to say first, peace to Brother Wujawu, who's joining us in the panel. If you want to say something, say hello to the people. So we're going to use this next hour to get into the main fundamental aspects of the lecture.
Okay, yeah, peace, Hotep, and thanks for sending me the link. And I'm just listening in. I'm just mute my mic and sit back and listen in and learn.
All right, man. I don't know if you are keeping in with the chat or whatnot, but if you see a question or something like that, or you just want to jump in and say something, just do so.
Okay, yeah, I'm listening on my speakers while I'm walking about, so I'm just checking everything out.
All right, man, no problem.
Okay.
All right, peace. Okay. Now we're going to deal now with the word Kemet, and so I've already written an article on the meaning of the word Kemet, but a lot of us don't read, so a video seemed necessary for us. And so I titled this section, The Meaning of the Word Kemet, the Use and Misuse of Determinatives. So let's get it in. Now, the reason why the meaning of Kemet is so important is because it's been an ongoing debate since the early 60s, and probably earlier than that, actually, since the 40s and 50s, but really strong starting in the 60s, on the meaning of the word Kemet. Now, we have two fundamental hypotheses on the meaning of the word Kemet. And hypothesis one is that Kemet means black land. And then you have hypothesis two, which means where Kemet means black people, or they're arguing that Kemet means black people. Now, another issue here is that both claims assume that the root of Kemet is the word Kim, meaning black in Egyptian. So we have these two hypotheses are based on this fundamental premise. So Kemet, the argument is that it means black, that the root means black, and then that Kemet means black land, or Kemet means black people. Usually in the Eurocentric camp, they argue for black land, and then in the Afrocentric camp, they argue for black people. Now, my argument here is that both hypotheses are incorrect, and for the following reasons. One, both hypotheses ignore chronology, meaning they never ask the question, when did the word Kemet first come into being in the ancient Egyptian writing, and what was the context for its inclusion? Was Egypt always named Kemet? And if not, again, when did it get that name and why? Two, both hypotheses ignore, again, the earliest usages of the term. Three, both hypotheses ignore the classifiers or the determinatives written in the earliest forms. So not only did they not look for the earliest forms, they did not, if they did, they totally ignored the determinatives, which tell you exactly what Kemet means. And so really this argument doesn't take long to finish. It's just other contexts where we have to, explain, but it's really an easy argument to win. And lastly, I say that both hypotheses fail to support the idea that the root of Kemet is Kim, meaning black. What I mean by this is that both hypotheses assume that the root of Kim is, or Kemet is black, is Kim, which means black. And so when we're doing scientific analysis, you have a series of hypotheses, and then you have the null hypothesis. And the null hypothesis is the idea that whatever argument you claim is basically no fundamental change, or it's a no as far as the fundamental research question. So if we have a research question, does the word Kemet derive from the word Kim, meaning black? The null hypothesis would be that no, Kemet does not derive from the word Kim, meaning black. And so that's one hypothesis based on a series of hypotheses that should have been brought forth when doing a scientific analysis of the word Kemet. And so we're going to deal with hypothesis one real quick. And it doesn't matter what Egyptological work you read. They all, for the most part, if they're written by Europeans and others, argue that the word Kemet means black soil. So I don't have to cite a whole bunch of them. I could just cite one major one. And if you read this, you've read all the other ones. This citation is coming from James P. Allen, who wrote a book called Middle Egyptian: An Introduction to the Language and Culture of Hieroglyphs. And on page 345, he says, the word Kemet, Egypt, literally means black, referring to the soil of the Nile Valley. CSA 2. This is why Egyptian, or the Egyptian language or Egyptian hieroglyphs, uses the preposition her, meaning on, rather than m, meaning in. Her Kemet means literally on the black land. So this is one argument here, and this is just one example of hypothesis one, that the word Kemet means black land or soil. They actually got this, I think, from Herodotus, who made, or if it wasn't Herodotus, it was some other Greek, and I have it in my notes, I just don't have it in memory. A Greek philosopher or traveler who made that assumption that the word Kemet itself derives from the black silt that was left after the inundation with the farming. That's the hypothesis, and they just rolled with it. And so then there's hypothesis two, which originated from Dr. Km.t in his book on the right in French, and I'll just translate. The genetic relationship of Pharaonic Egyptian and Black African or Negro African languages. And so in this text, he puts forth the argument that that the word Kemet, again, derives from a root meaning Kim, meaning black, and that it doesn't refer to the soil or the land, but it refers to the people. And we'll get into why he was inspired for that. And so I'm assuming that the majority of this audience doesn't read the French text, but to get this hypothesis, you don't have to read the French to get it. You can get the book Great African Thinkers, Km.t, edited by Ivan van Sertima, which came out in 1986. And the fourth printing was in 1992, if I remember correctly. And in that text, they include a lot of Diop's works and articles and ideas in English. So on pages 46 to 48, you could get this argument. And this is what he states. He says that the Egyptians had only one term to designate themselves, Kemet, the Negroes, literally, or the blacks, so to speak. And so he's arguing that they're calling themselves black people. He continues on that last page, and he says, in the Egyptian language, a word of assembly is formed from an adjective or a noun by putting it in the feminine singular. Kemet, from the adjective kim, black, from the adjective kim equals black. It therefore means strictly Negroes, or at the very least black men. The term is a collective noun which thus described the whole people of Pharaonic Egypt as a black people. So again, he's further making this argument that that Kemet means black people and not the black soil. And so he goes into more in the elaborate detail on for why that is. Now we're going to deal with hypothesis one and why it's wrong. Well, actually, this actually takes care of some of hypothesis two as well. And so we'll just keep it. But as I mentioned earlier, both hypotheses make the argument that the word Kemet, derives from a root kim, meaning black. Now, you have to understand that ancient Egyptian did not write out its vowels. So the words that we see are the consonants to the words, which means that they are the skeletons and you don't know the vowels. Now, there are various different Kemet words and Kim words, and they have nothing to do with black. And so the question is, why would you assume, based on these other renderings, that the word Kemet derives from Kim, meaning black, versus any other Kim that has a different meaning or designation? And so this is an example coming from the Collagen language, which is in East Africa and Tanzania, Kenya, southern parts of Uganda, and Ethiopia. They have different words that have, if you take out the vowels, which you see in the center column here, it looks like the words Kim and Kemet. And so if we didn't have the information on the left with the vowels, it would be, we could see why it would be erroneous if they have a word Kim, like the word Kimoi, meaning darkness, deriving from the same root as ancient Egyptian Kim, meaning black, but to assume that every other word here means black, or comes that the KM in these words mean black. So as we can see, for example, Kamama, the home or place of maternal uncles. It wouldn't be the home or the place of black maternal uncles. It wouldn't make any sense. Or Kamit, his, her, its mother, or his, her, its black mother. Kimiut, a famine. Is there a such thing as a black famine? Or Kimaita, Kemet, the late, a deceased person. The word Kim, to die. Kimit, become strong. Can you be black strong? I know there's some RBG people probably listening like, hell yeah, you can have and be black strong. But let's be scientific here. Is there such, and then, we're really get them this word Kemet, fine power or fine black power. And so that would be a concept in the modern times, given the experience here in North America. But in ancient Egyptian concept, in ancient Egyptian times, they had no such thing as black power. And then Kimayit, cereal or porridge. Is the porridge black? I doubt they were eating black cereal and porridge. And that would be related to the word kimyo, meaning loaf or loaf of bread. And so there is no black bread like that without some modern, modifications. And then you have dried, and meat, meaning country, and yemit, meaning homeland, country, state, terrain, region, which is one of the arguments for Kemet that I bring forth, that's actually the cognate for the ancient Egyptian word Kemet, meaning land. So we can see here that, assuming that all of these words here have a root Kim, meaning darkness, would just be erroneous. And it would be the same even in ancient Egypt, as I noted beforehand. So we could see these words here. The word Kim, meaning to perform, in the phrase Kim-t, perform work, and with the word Kerit or Kait meaning work. Km.t, inhabitants of Athribis. That's a city inside Kemet. And so if the word Kemet means black, then why would you have Kemet.t? Are these people blacker than the rest of the Egyptians who live in Kemet, who also lives in Africa surrounded by black people? Word Kim, complain. Is there such thing as a black complain? Or a Kim, black make fool? Or a Kim, a black book of wisdom? It's just ridiculous when you really think about it. And so, you can pause this again and look at it yourself and see why that argument falls to the wayside. And so you can't assume that just because you have the word Kim and written with the glyphs that we know for the word Kemet, that somehow that it automatically means that the word Kemet means black. That's not the case. So we have to have some other criteria for determining, what it means. So you notice that basically these are all homographs and consonant-wise homonyms. But when you look at these tail ends of these words, you see these hieroglyphs here. These are what we call determinatives, and they let you know the context for what the word means. So for instance, this word Kimet, a book of wisdom, this determinative here is used in ancient Egyptian literature to mean book, because it's something that they tied papyrus scrolls together with this rope of string. So it means books. And so for instance, this one here, a serapeum, a temple in Menepher or Memphis. So we have the determinative of a place, and then we have a bull. Now, a bull could be black, but that's not guaranteed. But it has nothing to do with black bull. It's a temple, it's a place. And so you've never seen in any of if anybody's ever visited Egypt, like I have, or been to a museum, you've never seen a black temple. It doesn't exist in ancient Egypt. And so that concept is thrown out of the window. And we can go on and on, like we have here, this determinative of a man with his hand to his mouth, pointing to his mouth or face, showing you that it is a verb, first of all, and that is a verb dealing with his mouth, something that he says. So you can't black complain. Black is not a verb, first of all. Black is an adjective. It describes a noun. And so this wouldn't make sense in no matter how you looked at it, because it's ungrammatical, it's conceptually erroneous, and it just, again, doesn't make any sense. So we're going to go into hypothesis 2. Now, where Km.t argued that the word Kemet derives from Kim meaning black, and that it means black people, it is because of this hieroglyph, this version of the word Kemet that you see here in the top left-hand corner. Now, I can surmise, based on the evidence, that Km.t did not read the primary literature. He got this from the dictionary. He looked at the dictionary and saw that this ancient Egyptian word for Kemet had a man, a seated man, and a woman as the determinatives, and the plural here, meaning a collective. So he automatically assumed that the word black here, Kim, or so-called the word Kim, he assumed, one, that it meant black, and that two, it was describing the determinatives here, meaning the people. So when Km.t says, that Kemet means black people, he's basing it off of this glyph. And you'll see it in the article written in Ivan Van Sertima's dedication to Km.t that I mentioned earlier. And so, however, what Km.t didn't know is that there's only one instance of this hieroglyph in the ancient Egyptian literature, and it's found in the hymns to Sesostris III in Dynasty 12. And here is the transliteration of the hieroglyphs. And here is I put where the word Kemet is, where you see the hieroglyphs, where the hieroglyph would be, if we were just looking at the raw stela or whatnot, here. So here's the details here, but you see Kemet here written twice with that same the same determinatives. And so it says it was after he had ruled Egypt or Kemet, and after he had put the desert, which is this word here, Desheret, in his company, and he's talking about Sesostris, that he came to us. It was after he had protected the two lands, which is this word Idibli here, and after he had pacified the two, sorry, that's the word here, Tawi, and Idibli here is the word for two banks, or this is the word for bank, and this W and Y is a suffix denoting double. And so same thing with this ta word meaning land here, and the suffix meaning double. So the two lands and the two banks, or the two sides of the river, the Nile River, that he came to us. It was after he had caused Kemet or Egypt to live, and after he had removed its needs, that he came to us. And so this is what this transliterates to, and this is what it translates to. And this is taken straight from our article on Kimet after I cited that text. And so what I stated was, the way that this passage is worded lets us know that it is talking about the state as a political entity, and not the Nisbi adjective form Kemet, those of Kemet. This is supported by the fact that Kemet is used in the same manner as all of the other political locations in the text. The names Desheret, Tawi, and Idibli in the original text does not employ personal determinatives. Furthermore, after the second sentence containing the word Kemet, it refers back to the word Kemet by means of a third person singular feminine suffix pronoun s, it. If it spoke about the people, we would expect sin, they, them, not it. So when we go back, saying to this text here, we see that it's speaking of different political entities. So the desert, Kemet, and the other designations for, saying Egypt being the two banks and the two lands, basically. So upper and lower Egypt, or upper and lower Kemet. And so even though it has as its determinative people, it does not say anything like they or their Kemet or they or something to that nature. It refers to the political state. It removed its needs, which you see right here. It meaning the state as a political entity, and not the people. So you couldn't argue, as Km.t did, that this black means people here, because when we go to the primary text, it has no such designation, and it doesn't make sense in the sentence or in the paragraphs. So this is why it's important to always go to the primary text when we have problems of definition, so that we can get better clarity and look at the glyphs directly. And so what Km.t didn't realize is that, one, Kemet wasn't always named Kemet. The word Kemet, and even the word Ta-Meri, which is another name for Kemet, didn't come along until the late 11th dynasty, the 12th dynasty. And in the earliest attestations of the word Kemet, You see this in this text here. It comes from a Wadi Hamamat graffito of the early 12th dynasty of Antef. Here, just like in the example that I gave before, we have the two versions of the word Kemet in the sentence. And we see here that this Kemet, like the other one, had a determinative of two people, but this version has a determinative of irrigated land. And so that's why I said it's real easy to dismiss both of these arguments, because, you know, the Eurocentrics are right in the sense that it means land, but they're wrong when they argue that it means black land. And so here is proof here that it actually means, you know, land, or it refers to land, because we see it here in the text. And the earliest attestations, see, the common attestations after a period is what you see here in this third row, this word Kemet here with the 049 city determinative. But the earliest attestations of Kemet are these two forms right here on the left-hand side. And so notice that the Kim glyph is backwards in this version. But notice these two determinatives here, the N23 irrigated canal and the N36. This is also a canal, you know, in used for land and irrigation and stuff to that nature. And so this deads and kills the argument that it refers to black people, because you couldn't argue that it's referring to black water or a black river. It doesn't make any sense. And so it's important, you know, to understand this determinative here, the N23, because the N23 and the 049 interchange. And I give an example here at the bottom. This is a hieroglyphic word, sapat, meaning district, nome, or necropolis. Notice that this version has the N23 hieroglyph determinative, meaning irrigated land. And then you see another version of the same word, but it has the 049 city glyph, district nome. Same word, same meanings, but different determinatives. So this shows you that they interchange. So even if I see Kemet written like this, I should be thinking Kemet like this, because they're interchangeable. They mean the same thing. They reference the same idea, which is talking about an irrigated land with water running through it, a canal, a river, or whatnot. That's what allows people to live in cities, water. And this is another important aspect that I bring out in the literature. This comes from a book by Fisher, Henry G. Fisher, called Ancient Egyptian Calligraphy, A Beginner's Guide to Writing Hieroglyphs. And so he's going through the determinatives. So he's showing the N23 glyph that we showed earlier, meaning irrigation canal. And this is how you would draw it. But he makes a note here. He says, in my book, Dendera, page 90, I note that the Old Kingdom determinatives, N20 through N22 and A12, these right here, these determinatives became the N36 in Dynasty 8 and the N23 in the late Dynasty 11. So remember that these were, the word Kemet didn't come into usage for the state until the 12th, about the 12th dynasty. So during the 8th and 11th dynasties, that's when these two glyphs, hieroglyphs here, transformed into these hieroglyphs, the N36 and the N23, the irrigated land, which tells you that these have to deal with irrigated land. And so I'm going to continue to the next slide. This, and I should have put the specific citation. This is coming out of Gardner's book on ancient Egyptian. And so those two hieroglyphs, the N20, N21, and N22, are a tongue of land or whatnot, or a stretch of land that is basically surrounded by water, or extends out into the water, or is on the edge of water. And so the pronunciation is Wajeb, or Wageb, which later became Wadeb and Edeb, because the J sound became D. And so it's a word meaning sandbank or shore. And especially here is word meaning bank, like a river bank, region. And in a dual form, Idibwe, remember that we suffix means two, the two banks, therefore Egypt. So you can see that beforehand, this word Idibu or Igebu was a word for ancient Egypt, meaning the two banks. And it had, just like what we saw in that version of Kemet, those determinatives. So we can see these determinatives used in the word for earth, field, town, or whatnot. So they're determinatives used for places. And so this is the meaning of the word. He did riverbank, riparian land, shore, land which waters of the Nile can reach. And so it's telling you that the word Kemet is a particular type of land, not just land, but a land with a river running through it, or water, a great amount of water. That's what those versions are telling you. And so it is dealing with fertile land. And fertile land is land with water on it. And so in the word to bush dictionaries, you can see the word Kemet in this entry with the 049 glyph here. He gives you the alternative determinatives. You see this DET right here? It means determinative. N23, N36, and 049. So the dictionaries is telling you that it's dealing with land with water, with irrigation, irrigatable land, land with a river or canal in it. It's very simple. And so, here are other places in the Waterbush dictionary that you can see it. You can pause this, when you want to read it on your own. But you see here two variations here. Kemet here in this phrase with the N36 determinative, and then Kemet here written with the N23, both dealing with irrigated land or river. And so when we look into other Black African languages, we can see, the more specific terms for or cognates for these terms. So like in the Bassa language, it's Kam, meaning farm. The Doi language, Kam, farm. It's Isitako, Ikam, farm. Ngodzin, Kam, farm. Kumadin in the Runda language, farm. Is again, a farm is a place that has fertile land, and of course you can't have fertile land without water. And so it is come to mean, country land in general in other places. So, in the Balu language, Kom, country, region. In Okam, Ikoma, city. Kom, in Zim, rural area. These are all Intu languages in many places. Batateka, Komwa, country, region. Kumi, country, and Bakwira. In the Zulu language, it's Kumbi, nation. In the Penda language, Guma, country, region. Diwoi, Gumo, village, city. Kaga, Gumi. In Lingala, Goomba, city. And in the Gala language, this is not a Chibantu language, but they have Gomji, land which grows warm and is healthily cultivated. All these are cognates or variants of the word Kemet, without the Egyptian T suffix. So, we have to be careful. And this is why we have to do a serious analysis when there is controversy and debates, and not just go with our first mind. We have to be able to systematically look at these things. So based off of the survival in other African languages, and based on the primary glyphs themselves, there's no way that one can argue that Kemet means black, one, and that Kemet means black people or black land. Both hypotheses have been falsified. And so now we're going to move on. Any statements or any questions from Mujabu or the chat before I move on? If not, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. I was just gonna say, man, you know, I've witnessed the conversation and the topic come up, you know, periodically over the past few years, really. And it seems to, you know, along with the work that you're doing and, you know, presentations like this, I hope that it's starting to kind of persuade the needle to swing the other way. And it seems like it is, because I'm seeing more people kind of make mention of this now, you know, instead of just, you know, parroting, oh, well, Kemet is the land of the black people. It's just referring to skin tone and things like that. Like you said, it doesn't make sense. So hopefully people will take this in and do the research themselves. So, you know, I do see it making a change with presentations like this and, you know, the conversation coming up. So, yeah.
All right. Well, now, hopefully I can go through this a little bit faster. The meaning of the word Ankh. And so, let's just get into it, because this is fun.
Well, one second though. I did glance at the if you can hear me, I did glance at the chat, and I don't know if you have it prepared or anything or whatnot, but somebody asked about the actual glyph itself, whether it's a charcoal. I know that was like an issue periodically too. Charcoal or what was the other things of crocodile?
Yeah,
crocodile tail or charcoal.
I'm gonna be dealing with that in another context, but
Okay.
One of the things that I've always had an issue with is that if it is a burning piece of charcoal, right? How come in the ancient Egyptian words for charcoal, it is not used as a determinative? Because the words for charcoal in burning charcoal is not Kimet or Kim in Egyptian. And so if that was the case, and I'm not saying that it's not, I'm just wondering why it is not used in any words dealing with fire, charcoal, nothing. And and what people got to understand is that the main glyphs, some of them can also be used as determinatives or classifiers.
Right.
And you would think that for something that is that basic, that the Kim glyph would be used as a determinative for any word, some word dealing with fire. Now, again, this argument is a lot bigger and broader, and there's so much that I could say, but because I'm dealing with other topics, there's just a lot I had to leave out. And right. That was one of those things.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to read that. Yeah, so that'd be good to get into another time or something. Yeah.
All right, no problem. So the second topic is the meaning of the Ankh. And so this is something that it just irks me, because I keep seeing these memes and all kinds of stuff written on the Ankh. And I saw a video not too long ago, even though the video's old, of Erykah Badu talking about the meaning of the Ankh and some stuff that she read on the internet. And nobody was really looking at this seriously. And because, we don't speak Egyptian natively, and we're not in our African historical space, a lot of us guess. And what happens is, if our guesstimations seem to make sense to us, then we just roll with it. And that's what a lot of people have done, with this word Ankh. So not only the word Ankh, but what the symbol of the Ankh is, how it evolved, and what it means, and how it relates to the symbology of it all. But the word which we pronounce in English as Ankh, that's not how the ancient Egyptians pronounced it, but us in English, we pronounce it Ankh. And we understand its fundamental meanings or at least one of the meanings, to mean life. And Ankh is just like the word Kemet. Ankh has a whole bunch of different meanings if you're just looking at the consonant clusters. But they obviously have different vowels and they have different meanings. And so we can't assume that just because we see an Ankh symbol that it automatically means life in every context in ancient Egyptian. That's not the case. But the word Ankh in general, when you see this symbol, is primarily a word for life, to be alive, Anku, the living, or human beings, people, a person, an inhabitant of a place, a citizen, a living one, and, you know, again, just these different determinatives. So, or, you know, these central determinatives. So this isn't a singular, a man, a person. And then when we're talking about people in general, just like what we saw in that Kemet glyph, we see the plural, the man and the woman, with the plural sign that we see here. And here's another variation of it, dealing with a population of people in general. And so this is the fundamental meaning, you know, of Ankh as we know it. Now, here are some common hypotheses for the inspiration of the design of the Ankh and its meaning. And so this is the most common that I see, and that is the Ankh symbol really in real life represents a womb of a woman juxtaposed or stacked upon an aspect of the phallus of a man. And or like in the case on the the case on the left, they also incorporated, and this is from Amen per Ankh blogspot.com, that there's sunset and sunrise. I don't know where they got that from. And that this is the fallopian tubes, and that's the inspiration. And then you see on the right hand side the quote unquote true mystery of the Ankh revealed: the male and female reproductive organs combined. And so they look at some body parts and it somewhat resembles the Ankh, and so that must mean it, because allegedly life, not allegedly, but we know that life goes through the fallopian tubes of a woman, and then of course sperm coming through the reproductive channel known as the phallus. And so these two memes and other memes are spread all over social media, and you know, this is the meaning that Erykah Badu was talking about in her interview that you will find on the web. So I totally reject this, you know, for reasons which will be announced in a little bit. And so the second hypothesis comes from our good brother Reggie, you know, out of New York, from the House of Consciousness family. And what he does here is he takes the word Ankh as spelled in English and treats it as an anagram, meaning that every single letter represents, you know, the beginning of a word. And so he has a website or a blog called thesecretoftheankh.com, and this is you know, some of his representation. So what he argues is that each, you know, letter in the word Ankh, you know, represents a deity in ancient Egyptian cosmology, and therefore, you know, like Amen, Amenet, Nun, Nunet, Ket, Keket, Het, 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 you know, meaning the hidden, the revealed, I guess the inert, the non-inert, you know, darkness and light, eternity and finiteness, if I remember correctly, which y'all can correct me if I'm wrong. And I forgot the aspect in which this was, but he was trying to make some point here. But see, there's a fundamental problem with this. And so as we see here, he's basing his assumptions on how the word Ankh is spelled in English. And this is not how you pronounce Ankh. First of all, these are 4 letters. And if you can see at the bottom of the screen here, I have the actual consonant sequence here. So we have this sound here, N, and then this K sound. And so this K sound, which is the H with a loop under it, is often translated or transliterated in English as KH. And so this KH is supposed to be a simultaneous articulation, a single sound, not 2 separate sounds. So this automatically nullifies, method-wise, his assumption that you can break this down into an anagram, that this has some kind of value. And then, you know, even Ankh is spelled wrong, you know, here. But I copied this directly from the site. But, and then secondly, this is not an A sound. The Egyptians didn't write out their vowels. This is in K or in H sound. H in H, hawk, like in hawk or lok, you know. And so we pronounce Ankh wrong. Ankh is a convenient pronunciation for us in English, but that's not how you would pronounce it in ancient Egyptian. And so that this anagram is just totally wrong, no matter how you look at it. And so this is a triliteral, meaning it's only 3 consonants in sequence, and he made it into a quadriliteral, 4 consonants, well, 3 consonants and a vowel, you know, which it wasn't. So that's the first thing. And then he continues on. It's a whole article, a whole page. And so now he equates the Ankh with Einstein's equation of E equals mc squared. This is just an example of when we're not grounded in, you know, proper methodology, you know, the lengths that will go to try to explain something that is actually very simple. And so he writes here, this expression represents a wave traveling at the infinite speed, time, separating darkness, light, creating a hidden Amen evolutionary train of events. This is featured as Neb Keppara inside of the Ankh loop. See, what he really doesn't understand is that the reason why that Ankh is in, that Kepper is in the loop here is because the sign that is normally represented as Kepper can also be pronounced quote unquote Ankh. And so it's a play on words here and has nothing to do with what he's trying to equate here in some quantum physical reality that just is, you know, the falsification of, let me go back, getting ahead of myself here. The falsification of this sequence here nullifies any and every single thing that he wrote on his page, because everything is based off of this. And so because this has been falsified, this is also falsified, because you just can't get that from the actual language itself. And so lastly is this was based off of a personal communication. And I wrote this in my article from an author by the name of Legacy Allen, who argues that the ancient Egyptian language is really the Amharic language, or survives today as the Amharic and Tigrinya languages found in Eritrea today. And so he argued that the Ankh symbol comes from, or the inspiration of its design comes from the Masab tables in Ethiopia, Eritrea, commonly you see in restaurants in which they eat from. We can clearly see that it has somewhat of a similar shape, but when you really look at it, it looks nothing like the Ankh whatsoever. And it's not even called an Ankh or anything in the sequence. It's just falsified. And you know, this is what we call in our circles lookership. So if it looks like it's something, then it must be it. And so we can't go with lookership in 2017. This is falsified as well. And so hold on, what's that? So now what my argument is that and this is what I argued in my 2013 work, alluja, that word that we was introduced to at the beginning, that the Ankh, the symbol itself, derives from the human body as well as an animal bovine body, because they're similar in terms of this stretch here. And that is the thoracic complex of the human body. And so it is confirmed visually by this artifact, and there's many of them just like this, where the Ankh symbol is juxtaposed by the Djed pillar and the wasp scepter. And we see here the 4 columns, top columns here, this represents the spinal cord. And it's used for words for spine, and this is the spine of Osiris. And so you have the spinal cord here, and then the loop of the neck, the collarbones here, and the sternum. This is what you see here in this rendition of the human body here. You see that same collar, the spine here. The loop here is that what's called the final rib. And then, you know, the line, which you see here, is the collarbones. And then the sternum. It's a representation, it's symbolic of the human body, but more specifically the thoracic complex, which protects your lungs. And this will become important because every single time, well, I'm not gonna say every single time, a good number of times you will see the Ankh symbol, first of all, being held by either kings or deities. And when it's being held by a deity and it's being in the company of a king, which we can see here based on this nimbus crown here with the cobra snake, this is a king, and I forgot which king it is, but we see the god Anpu or Anubis, which is Mbwa in Chiluba, a word meaning dog, that he is giving the Ankh and presenting it to his nose. Now, if this was a womb or a phallus, why would you be sticking a penis and a vagina womb to somebody's nose? Again, that doesn't make any sense. That's not what's being going here. This concept of life is dealing with the physical human body and simultaneously breath. The cognate for quote unquote Ankh in the Zande language, another negro-Egyptian or Km.t language, is honga. Remember what I said, that this is an H or a K sound in H. And this H corresponds, you know, saying to G, NG, in that fashion. And so this is honga, to breathe. Other confirmations of what I was speaking of. And so you see here, Heru giving this queen here, holding her hand and presenting the Ankh to the nose. You see Anubis doing the same thing here. The Ankh to the nose. And as I mentioned here, you usually see deities or kings or people with royalty holding it in their hand. It's a symbol of power. I'm giving you vitality. I'm giving you life. That's is what this symbolizes. But it symbolizes more specific to the breath. I'm putting my spirit in you. I'm putting my life force in you, the breath. That's what this is. I'm giving you blessings. That's another aspect of this, but we won't get into that. But I'm passing on, giving you blessings from the spirit world into the physical. This is what this is. And so in the article, I go more into the details of how we breathe and, you know, what these bones, why it's important to protect them and things of that nature. And all of that to show the correlation also between the Ankh symbol and breath. Because in the ancient Egyptian literature, you'll also see, for example, the deities Horus and Set tying these knots to this papyrus and forgot what plant this is. You know, representing upper and upper and lower Egypt. This here is the trachea of the body, you know, whatnot, or the breathing pipe. And this is the, you know, saying the heart or whatnot. And this is actually a hieroglyph, meaning it's a word sema, meaning the lungs. And so they're putting this knot, you know, here, but you know, this is a drawing rendition, but this is the actual. And you notice in the drawing rendition, they forgot what's up top here. So if you just saw this drawing, you'd be missing a lot of information. What you see here is the top of the Ankh or the Shinu on top of the trachea in the lungs, which also helps to confirm this. And I can say that this is an Ankh right here on the tree, even though it looks a little different than this, because the Ankh and this is just a variation of Sema, you know, the trachea, you know, saying lung complex. It's just an upside, like if you see it, it's upside down, in dealing with the human lungs. And I equate it to trees as well and the importance of trees. Got my slides a little mixed up. As I mentioned earlier, the word Ankh can also mean a beetle. And this is what you see here. And it's reaffirmed by the determinative for the beetle, which is also pronounced Keper. And that's why you see it here in this representation, which is a mirror, Tutankhamun's mirror, the word, this Keper beetle, because this is the Ankh. And of course, this Ankh, you know, there's a word Ankh meaning mirror. And so they're playing on words here. This is an actual mirror case with an Ankh meaning mirror that was actually in there at one time. But, you know, we have confirmation again in Kikongo, Ikoka, or Ikonga, a word meaning beetle. And again, K, and this one isn't nasalized. So it's just the N is dropped here, but it's the K sound for this sound here. And so further confirmation in Kikongo and into language is this word here, per Ankh, house of life, the name of a college of priests. This is the representation in the hieroglyphs, reading from right to left. This same phrase and the same institute is found in the Congo even to this day, and it's called Kukanga, the site of initiation, literally the institute that folds, ties, and unties principles of knowledge. This variant of Ankh, which is Hanga or Kanga, the variant of it is Zingu. The word Zingu means life, and this is based off of palatalization. Because of this I following the K sound, it was palatalized to Shi and then Z, or Z, Zingu, institutes of life. Life. This word Sansulu means institute. Ku is a word for place. And I can show you that Ku is a variant of per. And, you know, based on Kiku and some other things, but I won't get into that at this moment. But this concept of initiation and tying principles of knowledge is important because the earliest Ankhs were also shown as tied pieces of rope. What am I doing here? Okay, there you go. As we can see here. And so that's why I showed that when you see the Shinu, I don't know what that was for. When you see the word Shinu, which is on the right-hand side, that's what you saw at the top of the semi, or the lung trachea hieroglyph that you saw Horus and Set tying earlier. That's on top of it is the same. It's just the top loop part of the Ankh. And so what you would call this here is Shin or Shinu, the elongated part. But it has to deal with ropes and tying. And so we have cognates and Chiluba, Shinga, Singa or Jinga, to bind, thread, roll up, knot, encircle, tie with a wire, to braid, to weave. That's exactly what you see in this glyph. You know, Mujinga, cord, reel, braided rope. That's what all of these are. These are tied knots, you know, saying here, dude. Anybody who knows Egyptian knows that these are ropes, tied pieces of ropes. And so the inspiration for the shape of this is twofold. One, the physical body in terms of the Ankh symbol, and then the tied piece of rope that you would wrap around one's waist. But then it was used in a different context, this symbol here meaning eternity and protection. And then when it's elongated, it means name, or it's a paronym for name. And why the pharaohs are written inside the Shinu, but it's a tied piece of rope that you see here. So when it comes to the concept of life, in a larger article that I'm going to be doing on this again, I'm going to show you that the concept of the association between life, remember that Ankh can mean person, a living being. And that, but it's not just a living being, it's a living being in motion. The N2 framework has to deal with motion, life, vitality. So it's not just a physical body, because you can have a dead body, but it's a body full of breath. It is an animated body, an able body. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the word N2 is a variant of the word Ankh. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But here, you know, there's a philosopher by the name of Mugobe Ramose. And Ramose, that last name is cognate with what we know as Ramesses. But this is the Bantu people in, you know, Southeast Africa who still have these names, Ramose. In his text on the concept of N2, in a text called The African Philosophy Reader, edited by Coetzee and Roux, 2003, he says, African philosophy is consistent with the philosophic position that motion is the principle of being. According to this understanding, the condition of being with regard to every entity means that to be is to be in the condition of ness. Whatever that is perceived as a whole is always a wholeness in the sense that it exists and persists towards that which it is yet to be, because this is a characteristic of every existing entity. Being is to be understood always as a wholeness. And you should substitute the word being in this paragraph for into, because into means life. It means being. It means existent, an existing thing. And so this is what he's talking about. This whole article is on into. And so what he's saying is that into is not just simply a being, but it's a being in motion. Something can exist, something isn't being unless it is in motion. And so We have cognates of the word Ankh without the ha prefix, that K or that ha prefix. The root is just NK. And in other African language, for example, the Ashanti language, when we say Ankh, we say Akua or Inkwa. It means life. And what you see here is one of the Akua dolls or Inkwa dolls. These are given primarily to women who want to have children. Either they want to have one soon or they can't have children. And so what they'll often do is the prescription is to tie this doll on your back and walk around with it for a time as if it was a real child, a real life, a real Inkwa, a real body, an existing thing. And then the spirit of a child will enter your womb. Of course, you have to be with a man and do what adult people do to facilitate that process. But this is fundamentally what, you know, these representations are for. But you can see that they are also in the shape of an Ankh, reinforcing this notion of the Ankh that we see in ancient Egypt, because it has to deal with life, it has to deal with a body. And you can also see, even in this back of this rendition, the four pillars of the spinal cord, just like what we see in ancient Kemet, dealing with the spinal cord. You know, that's all the way to the back of the head. You know, that connects your skull to the rest of your body. And so this same phenomenon exists in West Africa. And so here are some different manifestations of this word in different languages. So in Proto-Bantu, we say Kua, an inhabitant, a person of. In Chikam or Egyptian, we'll say Ankh, a living person, an inhabitant, member of a group, a soldier. Chikam, Ankh, life. Anku, man. And then in the tree language, in Ashanti, Inkwa or Kua, life. In the Duala Bantu language, Ong, life. In Kikongo, which we mentioned earlier, Zingu, life. In Kikongo again, Inkwa, self. And it also means life. In collagen, they say K without the N prefixes. The N is also a prefix. They say KE, self. And there's a certain semantics that exists in Bantu or Chi-Bantu and Egyptian as well. So the word Ankh also means earth and land, as well as living person, inhabitant, member of a group, or a soldier. The root of Ankh is actually monosyllabic. It's actually this K sound. And this K corresponds also with Bantu Chi or Ki. This is a palatized variant of the word Ki. And so Ke became Chi or Ke or Ki became Chi. And just like what we find in ancient Egypt, earth, land, Proto-Bantu Chi, ground, country, underneath. Chi, inhabitant, person of. Because in African and in Intu languages, there's a correspondence between the land and the people, which is why I should have put the hieroglyph here, which is why in the version of Kemet that we saw earlier, you saw the people as a determinative, because the semantics, the worldview sees the people and the ground in which they exist on is one and the same. So that's why you see those two people at the end of the word Kemet, because it's still referring to the land, the ground, the country. As we can see, even with another variant of the word of into in this word Ankh. And so I keep saying that the word into is in Egyptian. I gave a few examples, but I wanted to show here that it is monosyllabic, and that chi sound corresponds to in Chiluba, excuse me, in the Proto-Bantu that we saw earlier, to the h sound in Egyptian in the very word Ankh. when in a different dialectical variation, the h sound is this j sound. And so the this version is jit, body, self. And then you have jit, serf, or servant. And then you have the fuller version, winjit, people. Remember what I talked about, things existing. It all comes from the word into, meaning body. Serf, and this is onto, or onto, people. Dijit, gift. And then winjitwu, offerings. Hajit, to burn, to roast. And then ja, or jir, fire drill. Jit, flood. Widjit, a body of water. Wujinu, flood. Wujia, canal. Wuju, cattle, or oju, cattle. Oinju, or into, goats. Winjuit, cattle herd. You can see from this monosyllabic root, when these other morphemes are added, it gives different context to the word. So we can see from starting from the left, going to the right, how it ends up in this form with the W, N, J, and then the suffix, for these words. And so you can pause it, study it. And so we can see here that winjet equals Ankh. It's just a different dialectical variation. And so what I'm arguing here is that the roots for both of these words is the j, this j sound here for people, and h for people here. And that all of these graphemes are morphemes. And so they just expand, but you see the correlation in every single one. People, people, goats, goat herd. Winju, offerings, unket grain, unket a product. And these were all given as offerings. It's just word for food. And I can go through a whole series of correspondences where, remember that Egyptian is monosyllabic. And from these monosyllabic roots, they add different morphemes to create words or extended words. And so you see the same correspondence. For example, in Jew, protection, Kiwi, protection, because these correspond, these are different dialects. Matter of fact, they may just be different languages that were in ancient Egypt who were writing with the script. And so you have, Anju, light of the sun, dawn, Anku, stars, coming from the word Anket, fire. All words for light of the sun and all that, and stars come from a word for fire. And so remember, we saw this root dealing with fire drill, earlier. And so Anjut, vessel, Anjit, a bowl, a vessel, Jew, a pottery vessel. And then we have Ankh, a vessel for libations. And we can go on, and you'll see the same correspondences. So everywhere this J is, it corresponds to K here. And so when you see Winjit, and this is where we get another variant, and I gave the lesson earlier, Winjit or ontos is where we get, this is you might as well say into. So this is what you say, this is their variant of it, into or inti. And so into is a variant of Ankh or Inqua and Unjit. But I can't show all the super details here, but in the article you will see. And so lastly, I didn't want to go this long, but it seems like I have. So the last thing, before I go on, is there any comment from you, Brother Wajahu, or anything from the chat? I guess he's
not that I could see right now. Nah, might as well keep on building.
All right. So lastly is the word punt. And so there's a very large discussion that I will have on this in the future and on paper. But, right now I'm just dealing with my proposal for the meaning of punt. Now, the word punt in hieroglyphs, you see right here at the top, this is the P, and in the actually PU. And so these are like complements, and or this is a complement, and then T, excuse me, N, and then the T, and then the foreign land determinative. So this lets us know that this is not in Egypt. This is someplace external to the borders of Egypt. So some people say Punt, some people say Puwanit, you know, different variations in terms of pronunciation, of course, because we don't know the exact pronunciation of how the ancient Egyptians pronounced it. But it's a very important word because this is a very important place. Now, this is a place where people went to, the ancient Egyptians more specifically, went to do trade. And it took them a long time. So it was a big event for them to get there. It took them some weeks to get there. So it wasn't like they, you know, hopped in a boat and then, you know, in an hour or two, they were there. You know, they had to plan, they had to get rations, you know, to go to Punt. So it was a faraway place, but in inner Africa. And so some people argue that it's in Eritrea, and there's some evidence that demonstrate that as a fact. You know, they found some baboon mummies that looking at the soil sample, it matches that in Eritrea. But there's other evidence that shows that it could be in Somalia, as far down as Mozambique. And so that's the stuff that I'll be getting into when I'm talking about the location in the larger work on Kemet and Punt. But for now, I'm just concerned with the word itself in the language. So the word Punt, straight off the bat, I got the inspiration for this looking at when I was first studying the Colagian language. Now, the Colagian people are very interesting because their oral tradition says that they came from ancient Egypt. And as I mentioned earlier, they live currently in places like Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, and maybe to a small extent in the western part, excuse me, the eastern part of Congo, which borders all of that, the Democratic Republic of Congo. So you can see a map over here on the right. I don't know how clear it gets, but this is the map. So you see Sudan surrounding, why it does that, okay. Sudan surrounding Democratic Republic of Congo, Tanzania, Rwanda, you know, Kenya, you know, all of that. And I don't know who made this map to spell Kenya that way, but that's another discussion for the future. But that's where they are primarily located now. So they migrated from Egypt during the time of the Greeks all the way down and eventually settled in the present day in these particular locations. And so there's a book by Dr. Taita Towit. He's deceased now, but he was a professor of linguistics, and he wrote the books on the Colagian linguistics. And so this particular book is a study of Colagian linguistics. It's a blue book if you ever get to get it. I highly recommend it for those who are serious about the study of the Colagian language. And so on page 417, he looked at, he cites, or he's trying to inform us about a grammatical feature called deverbatives. And so that the deverbative in Colagian, or one of the deverbatives, is the T consonant that ends the words. So for example, we have kipwa, to come, point uno, coming. And so these are verbs here. And then we have point unit, coming, but that's a noun. And so it's been deverbalized by the eat suffix that you see in that word poignit. And when I looked at this and I saw the structure of the word, it matched quite nicely the word punt. Now, of course, this is a hunch, and I'm going to need more to go on than be like, oh, that's it. I'll just roll with it and do like a lot of our people do. I had to do a lot of more, searching into some proofs of the word. But this is fundamentally what I argue that the word punt means. It means coming and going. That's at its more fundamental root. It has a derived meaning that we will get into. And so a pronunciation for punt, it survives in college and it's poiunit. This is how you would say it, poiunit, instead of punt, how we say it. Now, in his text, note 6 on that page, he says, there seems to be no problem when the singular o or eat et suffixes function with plural verb stems. Now, I got to go back. And so you see how I have here qui pois? That pois is the root. And qui is a prefix. It's just like the prefix ku in Chibantu languages. Collagen is not a Chibantu language, but it has certain features because it's what I argue is still a Chiana-Intu language or negro-egyptian language. And so it has certain grammatical features that are shared by Bantu. But collagen is a Chiana-Intu or negro-Egyptian Behair language, which is different than the Chibantu languages, which are Bere branch languages. That's a different discussion. But here, this verb is plural. Now, how can you have a plural verb? Well, one, plural verbs derive from nouns. And this word to come derives from a word ultimately meaning foot. And so you have foot and go. And so from feet to run or to go, and to go or to come, because if you're going anywhere, you're simultaneously coming somewhere. So they're the same word. So that's why it's a plural verb. But it's what I argue is that it's more so it refers to multiple comings and goings. So pois means more so to come and to go, but to go back and forth, to keep coming, going back and forth in terms of the plural action. And so the online collagen dictionary, now in his textbook, he's using the dialect of collagen that mainly uses P sounds. Whereas the online collagen dictionary the same word will be used with a B sound, the voice bilabial plosive. So the P is a voiceless bilabial plosive. So they say pois in one dialect of collagen. And then in another dialect of collagen, they'll say bois, come, arrive. And then you have bunu, because the vowel behind the P and the B is actually U. But when U is followed by an A sound, the U turns into W. So that's why it's pois or bois. But in the other variants you'll see, because it's not followed by A, is U. And so this will tell us also that when we see the P, W, NT consonants in Egyptian, that is more than likely that it's actually P, W, A. Poiunit. Poiunit. Because the A makes the W a W sound, whereas in other instances it's U. So bunu, come out or through. Bunu, come through or pass, via. Also equate the following: bun, follow along, go along a path, follow road. Go by means of pass through, go by. A variant of this without the U is just ba. Move, set off, go on a journey, leave, make for. Banwa, to pace. Ban is the root meaning pace, and wa is a plural suffix. And journey, trip, bonwa, trip. Now, why is all this important? This coming, going, walking, passing through, going by. What does that have to do with punt? We'll get to that. I want to introduce y'all to a semantics. And a semantics is, you know, it comes from the root sememe, or we know it as semantic, meaning definition, the meaning of words. But a semantics is the meaning as it relates to one's worldview. And so the worldview as encapsulated in the words, or what are the associations between lexemes or concepts as encapsulated in the language. So there's a semantics and an association, I should say a semantics and or an association between traveling and business. And so we see the same semantics in the ancient Egyptian language between this root shem and this variant that we have here at the top, Kemet, means walking, gait, but also business. That word shem, the root, means to go. Shem, pass, property to proceed, to go forth. Shem also means business, travel. Shem, to walk, to emerge, to proceed. And then the sh sound and the h sound that I mentioned earlier, they interchange in Egyptian. And so a dialectical variant of shem is chema, meaning to enter or to penetrate. And so the same root, there's a correlation between travel and business. And the word for travel is just a word meaning to walk, to run, to go, which ultimately comes from a noun meaning foot or feet or legs. So I just want to introduce that semantics to you so you can understand that this is not an isolated idea, that I'm not making this up. And so remember what I said, that Egyptian is monosyllabic. And so the same, that word punt, remember what I said, the root is bu or ba or pu or pa. That's the root. And it exists in Egyptian under these different forms. So we have wepwit, meaning business or mission. Wepwit, work, business, job, commission, matter, chore, mission, errand. Hapu, occurrence, passing, happening, traversing. Apep, enter. Seper, arrive, reach, come. Peri, per, to go forth, to emerge, to escape, to issue, to leave, to proceed. Haparu, sailors, workmen. So you see here, even with the P root, the PU, and P just in general, the association is between work, business, and travel. Work, business, travel, work, walk, run, go, enter, arrive. The same concepts based off of this. So what's interesting is that the word hoppy, which is a word for the Nile River, comes from this root. And so, as I mentioned in other lectures, the word for rivers and the word for water in general derives from a word for foot. That's why when you turn on the faucet and you leave it on, your parents say, "Who left the water running?" Water runs because we associate it mentally with going, running, and foot, the motion, the movement. And so this was captured in the actual vocabulary in the Chi and the Intu languages, negro-Egyptian. And so to take it further, we see that there's an association between travel, business, and marketplaces. And so this semantics, using a totally different word or series of words, is in Chiluba and Collagen. So in Chiluba, we have Chisalu, market, marketplace, contract. Wisalu, market to market. Luindu, walk, travel, tour, go function, to trade. Probe, have bad intentions, try to involve somebody in a case, to commit adultery. because you got to walk and travel to commit adultery, or at least that's how you used to, or somebody has to travel. I guess y'all didn't do it in your homes back in the day. I guess people bolder now. But and then we have Sarit, market, retail market, auction, business center, Sarit, marketplace, Siro, marketplace, business area. All of these words come from words meaning like street or associated with street. And the word for street means road in these African languages. Hold on, I have something going off in the living room. Ujawu, can you just say some things while I come back for a second? If you're there.
Okay, no problem.
If anything comes to mind.
Okay. All right.
I'll be right back. 2 seconds.
All right. 2 seconds, 2 seconds, 2 seconds. Yeah, well, hey, I can't, I'm not going to attempt to continue what his presentation, but just want to say Hotep to those who are watching, and check out the comments, see if I could chime in on anything. But that's interesting. I hope everyone is taking notes on different concepts, and linguistic concepts is important because linguistics is a science. And with any scientific endeavor, there's a nomenclature that comes with it. There's a specialized use of terminology and things like that within all the different disciplines of science, and linguistics is no different. So when you hear these terms, make sure you write them down if you are not too familiar with them and their meanings, and look them up. And not just a regular surface definition of these words. Look at the way that these are used within the scientific discipline itself. So look up the linguistic use of these different terms, like semantics that he mentioned, lexemes, morphemes. Learn about the differences between a lexeme and a word form, difference between a morpheme and a morph, a phoneme and a phone, a grapheme and a graph. That will help you out in understanding a lot of what's being said, because it does take a little bit of competency in some of these principles to follow along. Because someone who is like fresh, brand new to this information, if you're watching, it can be a little overwhelming, and you may seem like a little lost. But like I said, if you jot down these key terms, look them up, look up their linguistic use, not just the standard dictionary use or the everyday lay use of these certain terms, but just become familiar with it, and you'll be able to follow along. Like I said, when he mentions graphemes, morphemes, lexemes, semantics, and things like that, you gotta do it. You gotta put in the work, man. I'm telling y'all. I think he's back. Yeah, he's back. So I was trying to hold it down without saying. I said a lot without saying nothing.
I appreciate it. There's smokers in this building, and so there's certain alarms that'll go off on the outside, and you got to put in a code to get it off. So I got to, be vigilant with that.
Okay, all right.
So,
well, I'm gonna mute myself and just listen in some more.
All right, I appreciate it. So, as we can see here, continuing, there's a connection between road and street, but foot, and like we see in these verbs here, like salu and jila and jili, and there's another variant, jilu. They're all the same word. It's just that the jilu and jili are palatalized variants of salu that we see in terms of the word street, or chisalu, street. But that's the same word. It also means market. And injila is a word for highway, road, passing, and kajili, footpath, trail, pathway. But we say a footpath because, prior to having cars and highways, the roads, quote unquote, were paved by people simply walking over the grass. And so the foot actually made a trail. And so it made a path to a place. And so
I have a question though.
Go ahead.
Before you go too far, you said a couple of things that made me think about it, and I'm thinking this on the spot, so it's not like some research I've done or anything. But you mentioned the semantics, and and it basically dealing with the worldview, connecting with associations. And so you mentioned that Shem means to go, and you mentioned do business and things like that. But now what came to my mind is the season of conducting business, which is called Shemu, which they say is a season of harvesting. But when you harvest your crops, that's when you actually can vend and sell your goods, and you divvy your things and you collect taxes on it and things like that. So it just made me think about that. I don't know if you've ever made that connection, or if there's a connection, but just thinking
Yes,
about
it's I have that. I don't know if I have it in here, but it's in the paper, because there's another something, there's a related concept that I know I have in here that is talking about going forth during spring. And it's that same concept, but I think it's a different word. But I have that word dealing with Shem, in there.
Okay.
And so, so yes, I made that connection. I appreciate it. So, so as again, y'all can pause and go back and look at these slides, but you'll see there's a correlation between street, road, footpath, and market, and business. And so all of these concepts are tied together. And we even have some scholastic literature that reinforces what we're seeing in the languages. And this is coming from Dr. Modupe Oduyoye in a text written by or edited by Agdebola dealing with West African religions. And in this particular citation, he says, Dr. Oduyoye, talking about just exactly what we're talking about, but I'll just read. He says, the reflex of these, and then I put in brackets, cited words for land. So he lists a series of words just for land itself. In Yoruba is ita, outside, also street and market in Ijebu Yoruba. So pay attention to what he's saying. The word for outside is the same word for street and market. So the word basically for land, outside, is the word for street and market. As ita occurs in the name of Ijebu Ode, Oba Abanta, Oba ni ita, and my tones are just way off, so don't stab me, Yoruba people. There is a king in the land. And so ita meaning land in this sense. Yoruba ita also means, again, outside, market, country, land. See, all of this stuff is going to tie together. Outside, market, country, land. It is in this way that Hebrew hus, outside, is cognate with ewe, asi, market. And a lot of the West African languages that have correspondences with the Semitic languages, they lost the H sound. So what is hus, outside, in Hebrew, in ewe, is asi, market. And in the Grebo language, what is bro, earth, Aramaic, bar, field, is related to the Songhai word bardi, market. So he's showing you outside, road, path, land, country, all of that is tied to the words for marketplace. Hopefully y'all get the point where I'm getting to when I'm talking about Punt. He continues on the next page. He says, the semantic connection between street and market can be cross-checked in Hebrew, shuk, street, in Ecclesiasticus 12:5. A word whose cognate in Arabic, souk, means market. So in Hebrew, they kept the word for street, they kept that same word for street, but in Arabic is used for the word market. Is a cognate in the Chichua Bantu language, imsika, meaning market. Hebrew, hus, is street, which we saw earlier, and husut, asikalon, totally messing up that word. The streets of Ashkelon. 2 Samuel 1:20. And so you see that the word husut is streets. That's the plural. The oath makes it plural. The streets of Ashkelon. And it occurs in synonymous parallelism with Rehoboth, square, in Proverbs 1 and 20. And so, you know, like a market square. So again, the concept of street and market is the same, but the word for street comes from the word meaning foot and meaning to travel, to go back and forth. All of that same words in these African languages, and so you see how they play out. So that semantics and the semantic confirmation, we already gave one in Egyptian, but now I'm giving another. So we had this word merit, street, but merit, bank, shore, sandbank, kwai, embankment, marketplace. You see the same concepts coming here. And you know that Ta Mary, they say means the beloved land, but the word mer is actually a word for land. It's a synonym for Kemet. But ancient Egypt was basically a big marketplace. Matter of fact, for those who've been to Egypt, you'll know, like if you've been on like any of the ferries or the boats or whatnot, when you're on the ferries or the boats, you have people coming out in the water trying to sell you items. And then, of course, where are all the markets? Right on the bank's edge. So you pull up your boat to the shore and you go and buy something, and then you just travel back in the direction back home. So the concept of the space, the canal, the sandbanks, the bank, the shores, and you know, a river is just a street for water. It's a road for water. It's a road for boats. And so the same thing on land is metaphorically applied to rivers. And so it's the same thing. So the same semantic, street and marketplace, using the exact same word. But notice also that mer also means to run aground, to strand. So this concept of running is central to it. But the word mer, bull, is also a derivative of that word mer, meaning ground and foot. And so when you talk about mer, bull, you're talking about a charger. You know, like bulls charge. They're known for running and destroying some stuff. I want to say the other word, but for some stuff, you know. And so their words, some of their words for bull have to deal with its characteristic of charging vigorously and destructively, running. And so when you see this word hapu, the Apis bull, the word association with Osiris, it comes from the same root meaning runner, the same word meaning runner. And so running, bull, all of that that's where you see. So I'm making the association that from mer, running, walking, going, etc., there's a derivative meaning bull, and we see the same semantics with a different word. When we go back, it's what led to street, and the concept of street is what led to the bank shores marketplace. Okay. And so the word punt really isn't an Egyptian word. It's a loan word from a related language, meaning the Collagen folks. And so the Collagen weren't the Bere originators of the old Middle Kingdom Egyptians. They were of that stock from the New Kingdom going to the Coptic branch, the Beher branch of negro-Egyptian. And so the Middle Egyptian cognate for punt is what we say oben or bin or weben, you know, to rise up, overflow. Weben, to shine, to rise of the sun. Weben, spring, what comes forth. That's what the word I was talking about at correlates conceptually to what you was talking about, Brother Bujawu. Weben, spring, what comes forth. And we know that that deals with sun and seasons and all this other kind of stuff. And there's some other stuff that correlates with this that I'll get into another time. and Webenu, rays of the sun. And so we're talking about the springing, the shining, but the going forth of rays. So that's what this fundamentally, when it talks about the rays of the sun, that aspect of the light or the fire that shoots forth, that springs forward. And then we have Weben, a reduplication, one who comes forth. And so the W is prefixed. It is not central, and it's not centered in the word for punt. Even though it may have a U or an A, behind the B, the W sound is prefixed here, and it may be an O or U. So Ubin or Obin. And so it may have been an N sound at the end, and I say that based on Bantu. So if you have my text Nesubiti, this page or this table is repeated in the text. But we see here the correlation, like with Weben, to shine, to rise of the sun, corresponds to Proto-Bantu, bing, glitter, be red or good, shine and splinter, binge. And then we have bing, bingo, Proto-Bantu, dislike, refuse, pride, arrogance. That word became a grammatical feature in Chikam or Egyptian, Middle Egyptian, and became a negative particle, meaning to refuse, a negative, to reject. So it's just bin in Egyptian. And then we have bing, binga, mingu, cut, slice, wound, sharp edge, grass. And then we have webenu, wound, injury in Chikam. So we say it's inga, obing, obing, opun, obun, and what I hypothesize, and I need to find what Dr. Theophilo Obinga's name means, because he may have an ancient, quote unquote, ancient Egyptian name. And remember what I said in Greek, the W, the prefix W, like in Wasir, which becomes Osiris, it's the same thing here. All of the W's become O or U in Greek. And so those Weben or Weben may be O in terms of its vowel representation. And that's what you see in Obinga, as in Dr. Theophilo Obinga. So one would have to see if his name means to shine or splendor or cut, wound, like a ferocious, warrior, or one who's prideful or arrogant. Anyone could probably fit, Dr. Obinga, depending on the circumstance. But again, showing the vitality of the N2 languages when confirming and clarifying for those who say the ancient Egyptian text hasn't been deciphered. Not trying to rehash that debate, but since I'm here. So in Chikam, continuing with the cognates for punt, we have penny. Now the online Wharton's dictionary just says it's a verb, but we know it has to do something with walking or motion because of the determinatives here of the walking legs, And so Egyptian, just like collagen, has a P and B interchange, dialectical interchange. And so we have benu, to escape, to depart, because remember, ben has to do with motion, going. Then ben, to make flow of the Nile, to swell. Benin or bing, to overflow of a granary, to swell. But it has to do with motion. And so in collagen, we have reflexes, bun, follow along, go along a path, follow a road. Bun, go by means of, bun, pass through, go by. And then there's the name of the collagen people is, or some of the collagen people is called Punut, which is a word for immigrant, settler, arrivals, wanderers, nomads, transient peoples. And as I mentioned, it's also a name for some of the collagen dialects who settled in parts of Kenya. They're known as Punut. But it's a word that basically means an ongoing traveler, or a settler you know, an immigrant settler or something like that. It means arrivals, wanderers. But all of these words, you know, is dealing with, again, travel, road. And, you know, the early folks, the people who did the actual marketing or who did the actual trading and stuff were actually nomadic pastoralists folks. They were the ones who were doing the trades, because they were the ones who would on a regular basis travel these long distances to get these goods and then find their way into settled places and then settle on the edges of the town and sell and trade the goods. And so what I'm arguing is that Punt means marketplace. It is a path, it's a general zone that the people used to go to in Central East Africa to do trade. Now, what I'm gonna get into besides the name, I'm gonna have archaeological support for this. And I will show that Punt was not just one little area. It was the main point if you was going by river or by the ocean on the edge, was those border states. Now which is Ethiopia, Eritrea, Somalia, going to the edge of the tip of Mozambique. But then you had the other part, because it was split by the two Niles. Well, there's one Nile River, but it splits in two. So you have the blue and white Nile. And so going on to the white Nile, you know, and going into that area where they're back into their original. See, the collagen people didn't originate in Egypt. They traveled from the Great Lakes region to Egypt, became Egyptians, you know, at a particular point, but they still kept their culture and things, and then migrated back down during the Greek period. So they're going back to their homeland, the place of Punt, the place of the arrivals, the place of the marketplace, which is the central African spot, which is Kenya, Congo, Tanzania, certain parts of what is western part of Ethiopia, the southern part of Sudan. All of that is the original Punt. And then you had the other Punt, which is by the bank or the shores, the other marketplaces, which is over there by the Red Sea, which is Arabia, the southern part of Arabia, like where Yemen is, where they got a lot of incense. And then on the African side, going all the way even into, you know, again, Tanzania and Mozambique, and even those islands. And to an extent, it may even have gotten as far down as Madagascar. And so that's what the archaeological evidence and everything will show. And so this is basically the key Swahili states is where Punt was, quote unquote. It's a general pathway, a general open area where these different open marketplaces were. And so this is where also the Chinese and the Indians came to trade during pharaonic times. And so, you know, this is the center point where Africans got chickens and bananas. And so chickens and bananas are not native to Africa. They come from Asia. And through trade in early Asia during the pharaonic period, that's when these Asian immigrants would come into East Africa on the coast, trade and stuff, and then goods would come into Inner Africa, and goods would come from Inner Africa out and go is back into Asia. And so this might explain why there's certain features and concepts that you'll find in China, you know, Japan and India, that you also find in Inner Africa, because there was trade going on. These were big marketplaces. So this whole concept of globalization is not new to African people. It's actually old. Europeans are late to globalization. And as I stated in another article, you know, after the Arabs were kicked out of Spain, that's when the Europeans start getting into the marketplace, the world marketplace. Because the Arabs had a stronghold over the Red Sea and the parts of the Mediterranean, that's why Christopher Columbus had to travel around Africa to try to get to India, because they heard of India and the Chinese goods from these inner Africans who were already doing trade with them. And so all this becomes very important. But if to understand, you know, saying Punt, you got to understand it as a marketplace and things of that nature. But also know that that same root in these collagen languages is also a word for enemies. because it's the ones who saying arrivals, the comes who travel and do things. Matter of fact, it's semantically cognate, not lexically, but semantically cognate with the word amu and the haparu. Well, it's lexically cognate with haparu, but the amu, and these are these traveling nomadic pastoralists, the quote unquote Asiatics, who were their enemies. But these are the people who would go back and forth, who were adversaries of the Egyptians, who would not settle. And so you'll figure when you read the Egyptian literature, you'll always hear about these roaming nomadic pastoralists who would come in and plunder and take goods from Egypt, and they would always have to fight and be at war with. And so, that's for another discussion at another time. I end this presentation, and so I try not to do one of my long 3-hour presentations, but it seems like I'm back to my old ways. So I will end it there. I thank you all for joining me, and if you have any questions, put it into the chat, and we can go from there for a few minutes. Otherwise, I will end it. Do you have anything to say, Brother Ujawu?
No, other than excellent presentation. And I know you said you made references to the larger article, a larger book, and things that you're working on. So I look forward to the publication. I know on a couple of topics, I know you've been at it, because I know how it is, because sometimes when you research, you're attempting to answer a research question, but then in focusing on one research question, something else will come up and it'll be a side note, and then you end up looking at the side note, it'll catch your attention, and then you off writing a book about the side note, and then you got to come back to the major. So I know that's probably what you experienced with Kemet, because I remember you brought it up a while back, as far as Kemet, Punt, and then I believe it was some more on Ra and Ogun and things like that. So I'm just looking forward to the publications, so I can digest it all in one good plate of one plate.
Yeah.
One plate.
Yeah, that's the hard thing about doing these presentations online, at least. You can't go through all the details, and it takes so much just to explain certain concepts, which would be better in written form. But some of this stuff, again, I already have text written on it, so you can go to my academia.edu page and read about my thoughts on the Kimet, and even that's going to be updated and revised. And then if you have my 2013 book Aluja, you can get my primary thoughts on that, but that's being updated and revised because I want to show linguistically how the word inqua or Ankh turns into the word into in its relationship, and how the overall framework for quote unquote negro-Egyptian speakers is manifested and kept alive by the Bantu speakers, and how Bantu is really almost a mirror image of negro-Egyptian post-classic, or what I'm saying now is China into post-classic. So I don't know if you were there at the beginning when I gave that.
I missed the beginning. Yeah, until I came in. But now I have a question then, because a lot of people ask me this in terms of Middle Egyptian or Egyptian. Everybody just says Egyptian, and they always ask me, well, what's the closest African language contemporary being spoken today? What is the closest to it? So what would you say for that? Because I heard you mentioned post-classical or Bantu being closer to the post-classical in Egyptian. So
yeah, okay. I'm a roundabout answer your question, but my quick answer is I don't know. But what I was hinting at is that what I talked about at the beginning of the lecture is that I'm proposing a name change to Negro-Egyptian to Km.t, which means the family of Ntu, or Ntu family. And I gave my reasons for the suggestion because of certain issues that we keep coming across when we talk about Negro-Egyptian. And so one being the Negro factor in Negro-Egyptian and how that is a pejorative in English, but more so how it is in many respects unscientific. We understand why Obinga did it, and I gave the context for why he did it, but it's problematic at the same time for scientific reasons. And so, and then when we start talking about Egyptian, Negro-Egyptian, you know, I have to go through the spiel and show them that Negro-Egyptian is not the Egyptian languages. That it's a totally separate concept. It's a family versus Egyptian being a part of the Negro-Egyptian family. But then it's further compounded when I talk about Middle Egyptian being a separate language from Coptic, which is still an Egyptian language.
Right. That's now see that's good because you know I run into the same issue and it's easy. You know, I understand why people can get confused with it because when you say, okay, well, Coptic is not Middle Egyptian, you have to be specific and say Middle Egyptian.
Exactly.
And you're like, well, no, Coptic is an Egyptian language, but it's just a separate language from Middle Egyptian, but it's very, very closely related and blah, blah, blah. So I think it would be really good to persuade a consensus in the change because, you know, you got Egyptian and then we're holding on to that word Egyptian. You know, people have a problem with that. Then, like you said, Negro, and everything like, what's up with this Negro-Egyptian, you know, so it kind of, you know, so it'll be more scientific and hopefully open the way for more people to learn about it. So yeah, that's so what was it again? You had
Km.t. I'm gonna find it on the presentation here, and I'm gonna go so you can see it. Hold on one sec. And then I saw a question.
I see it. You got a why. I saw you said why Km.t, or yeah, it is. There you
go. So I'm put it on the screen again for the audience. So hopefully you can see it. So what I was saying is that Mubabinge Bilolo already named, he wasn't dealing specifically with Negro Egyptian because he just think all black Egyptian, all black African languages are related, you know. But he calls them the greater Ntu family, the Ethiopian family. And so he really stresses that in his book towards a Chicam Coptic Luba dictionary. You know, and so what he's saying is the Bantuity of the Egyptian and Coptic vocabulary, the Bantu nature of the Egyptian and Coptic vocabulary, you know, in the essays of Holmberger and Obinga. So that's the subtitle. And so what I'm doing is suggesting that we take Mubabinge Bilolo's title for what he perceived as the languages and slap it specifically or replace it, the Negro Egyptian specifically, since that is something that is scientifically based and not just a hypothesis that they're all related. So it's a linguistically, scientifically based sound language family. We're just replacing the Negro Egyptian, which is problematic for scientific and other reasons that we mentioned, and replacing it with Km.t, and stressing that the Chi-Bantu languages, the Bantu sub-languages, are an extension or a firm continuity of Negro-Egyptian post-classic, which is the third stage of Negro-Egyptian. And so what Mboli mentions in the book is that Proto-Bantu, there's no separation between Proto-Bantu and Negro-Egyptian post-classic, meaning they're one and the same. So this fundamental concept of into is an all-encompassing concept, because not only is that word into found in the Bantu languages, and I mentioned earlier Wilhelm Bleek, who coined the term Bantu and referred it to, not coined the term Bantu, but coined the language family designation Bantu. Based on the fact that when he started studying these languages in Central South Africa, all of them, for the most part, had different variations of the word into. Muntu, Bantu, Kintu, Hantu, all of that. And what I'm saying is that these very same words are in Egyptian. And so by you know, for other grammatical reasons and everything, for you, these words are, the Egyptians called themselves Bantu, as a different variation of Bantu. And that's what, you know, and so they belong to the same Into family. And so that's why I'm saying Chiena Into. His designation to me is perfect, based on cultural, psychological, spiritual, linguistic, and genetic DNA, all of that, all encompasses one particular family, the Chiena Into family. So even the Wolof language and the Beher language, when they want to say man, they say neat, which is a variation of Nitu or Into. And what I was showing in the slides is that all of the variations of the word into, and I didn't really get into all of them because, again, the time, all of the variations of the word into are found in Egyptian. And so one of the indigenous variants, it doesn't say into particular, it does for, but it's a pronoun. Is this word here, because the word into means things. It means body. It comes from a word meaning body, but it means to exist, life, being, right? And so this word here at the bottom, which we say, you know, Winju or whatever, Wineju, however we would pronounce it, this is what I argue became ontos in Greek. And so remember what I said, all of the W's become U or O in Egyptian, from Egyptian, when borrowed from Greek. And so that's where you get the two O's from. And then the N, and then this J sound, which would have been J in the Old Kingdom, remember it merged with T and D in the New Kingdom and later. So this is when the Greeks was borrowing heavily, you know, from the Egyptians, when this sound was a T. So they would have been like onto, which you see in the Greeks, ontos. This is into. And so it's the same word, just how it's used in Egyptian for things, products, units, people, stuff like that. Is again, is used just like for into, meaning people, men, women, society, folk. And all of the words for the Egyptian people are just words for people. Whether you say Ramech, whether you say the Anjos, whether you say Rek, all of those are different variations of the word into. And so I have to do you know, a series of pages to show you the sound changes. And so that's what I was getting at with this. You know, I don't know if you saw this slide or when you came in exactly, but I'm showing the evolution of into from Nkiku and how you saw this.
Yeah, I saw this one.
Okay, so you see how, you know, Nkiku becomes into, you know, by this series, and I'm showing how the word for body, you know, becomes a word for form and all of that. And, you know, the semantics, you know, there, I would have to go further, you know, for the other discussion when I'm talking about the Ankh, because the word Ankh is the same word, you know, meaning life, person, being, but it has the same root in tree, which is why it's associated with plants, you know, and life and breath and stuff like this, these different words. And so I'm going through the whole slideshow again.
Oh no,
that's another 3 hours.
I'm about to give you my title, MC Iron Lung. No,
yeah.
but I think that's good if the consensus can roll with that, because now, you know, I asked about the closest because Bantu is a large, you know, you have quite a few Bantu languages, and I see a couple of people that speak Bantu languages, you know, they're coming up with similarities with Middle Egyptian words and things like that. You have Bantu language from South Africa, isiZulu, Setswana, what's some other ones? So, you know, the question comes up, all right, well, which is closest, you know?
Yeah, it's not a matter of closest. See, the problem is with Egyptian is that you don't know what is really native. I mean, you, to a certain extent, you can by the frequency test, but a lot of the words and phrases aren't native Middle Egyptian. It may be some other language, surrounding language that comes there. So you may find a word or a series of words and phrases that, you know, you'll find in Bantu, but, you know, there's certain phrases that correspond between Egyptian and Bantu, but then that same phrase in another different variation won't correspond with any, you know, in words in that same language, because it's not a Bantu language. That phrase or word or whatnot will come probably from a Cushitic language, or like the Afar people or something like that, the Behas and things of that nature. And it confuses the situation because there was a number of different speakers in ancient Egypt. And so I wish I had on this computer, remember when I was doing that test of trying to interpret or trying to translate an Egyptian text with just using one language, and I couldn't, because the different words, you know, like I ended up using 3 different languages. So the word from collagen, Chiluba, and if I had to, Yoruba language, because each one of them didn't have all of the same words. And so, but this happens naturally in languages, you know, because it's a concept called obsolescence, to where certain words become obsolete in a language, but another language may still carry it. You get what I'm saying? So they could have all had these words at one time, but because of obsolescence, those words no longer are active in that language. And so I find this, especially like when I'm comparing Chiluba Bantu with Kikongo. So for example, like what I have on the screen, like Kikongo still has the old word, the cognate for Ankh, which is Zingu, life, or Inkwa, life and self. But to find the word life in Chiluba Bantu, you're not going to find it, the word cognate for Ankh. What they have is a different word, which is Moyo. But Moyo is cognate with the word, what we say is Ib, or heart, in Egyptian. And all of its other meanings. Chiluba has all those other meanings as well. But it also has to deal with life, because of course the heart deals with life, you know. And so these are neighboring languages. Like you can go across the street and find a Kikongo speaker in Congo, you know, if you're a Chiluba speaker. And so they're closely related, but they have totally different words for the same thing. But both of them can be found in Egyptian, you know, but the question is, do you find them in the same text? And that's what we need. That's the next level of scholarship for Egyptian, is really figuring out where these texts were found and what words do we find in these texts that we don't find in other texts from other different areas.
Yeah. Yep. That's something that definitely needs to be done, because I was thinking along those lines a while back in terms of genres of literature, and you know, we just, although we go to the primary, but we kind of just stop there because we're focusing on the content of that particular piece. But once you step back a little bit and see the bigger picture, now you find the primary. Now you need to find, okay, well, where was it located? Where was it found? Try to trace that out, and then periodization, and then take a survey of the vocabulary from that time period and the same kinds of literature, and then we'll have, like, we could have lexicons, or vocabulary lists categorized based on location, 1, 2, period of time, and then 3, genre. And I think we can probably come away with some good observations out of that.
Exactly. Now, I saw a question earlier, I think it's from Brother Aziz Fall, asking me to repeat what I said about into and motion. And so remember what I said, that into is cognate with the word Ankh. It's a dialectical variation of the word Ankh. Both Ankh, into, and anju come from a root qui or qua. And through sound change, we got these different pronunciations. And so Magobe Ramose, I'm gonna put it on the screen now. He wrote several different articles in this book. They're all dealing with into, the concept of into. And on this particular page, the book is called African Philosophy Reader. And so again, this is Magobe Ramose, who's a philosopher, and he was saying that African philosophy is consistent with the philosophic position that motion is the principle of being, of into. According to this understanding, the condition of being with regard to every entity, what means that to be is to be in a condition of ness. Whatever is perceived as a whole is always a wholeness, in the sense that it exists and persists towards that which it is yet to be, because this is the characteristic of every existing entity. Being is to be understood always as a wholeness. Now, this is in a larger context. Remember, being, he's using being and substituting it for into, because that's what into means. It means being, to exist. And the deeper connotation of this means to have form, to have a body. But what I'm saying is that this to be or to exist is synonymous with life, to have life. So when you say Ankh, one of its meanings should be being, based on its cognates in other African languages. It should be being, to be, the copula, as we would say. And so to be means to have a body, to be in motion, to have motion, to have life, to have vitality. And so, but there's a deeper context in which he's talking about, is that there's no, it's just like in physics. There's nothing that is at absolute rest. There's no thing, there's no into at absolute rest. All things, all into are in motion. And all things are becoming something. So when you talk about into, you're specifically talking about a particular being in motion caught in a specific state at a particular time that you're observing it. You get what I'm saying?
No, I get it. I get
well,
it.
I'm asking as you, Aziz, like he's, but for Brother Aziz, hopefully you get what I'm saying. Matter of fact, I mentioned the ontology. I have an article on my academia.edu page, and it's called Boilu, Bois Into, or on Intuology. And this citation, with the greater context and other citations when I'm explaining Intuology, is all of that is there. So it's on my academia.edu page. Just go to academia.edu, Asar Imhotep, and then one of those articles is there, and you'll get the full gist of exactly what I'm talking about. I cite Johannes John, who wrote a book called Bantu, and he says the same thing. He's talking about Ntu is not a static thing. It is dealing with motion. And he said only if you are able to stop time or to stop existence will you find out the essence of what Ntu is. Otherwise, Ntu is that being in motion. And so what I'm saying is that when you're talking about Ankh and life, it's not simply that something is alive just sitting there. What they're talking about is motion, which is why the word Keper, which is a word meaning to be, being, becoming, is also a word for human being, for child, to exist. Again, that's why you got to get familiar with this concept called semantics. So you can use other words and other concepts within the same language or other African language to show the correlation, the mapping, the relationship between concepts. And it's the semantics which Mboli argues is ultimately how you're able to tell and distinguish what language groups belong to what family. And so when we look at Semitic, they don't hold the same semantics that the Km.t or the negro-egyptian language family speakers have, even if they have the same words. For example, the words for sun in negro-Egyptian or Km.t often derive from words meaning fire. So the words, the same word for fire is the same word for sun. In Semitic, they correlate the sun with Shem, that same word that we were talking about earlier, meaning to go, to wander, to follow. In other words, they're focused on the sun traveling, alleged traveling from, right to left in the day. And so their word for the sun has to do with traveling, not with fire. Two different semantics, two different correlations. And so, that's why all of this becomes important. But so hopefully I answered his question. I'm trying to look on my phone at the chat. I'm way far from wherever they at the chat. I'm trying to anyway, but I don't think I see any other questions.
Yeah, I see just a couple people chiming in. Brother Ben, Monica, Tony. Yeah, so now this is good because man, like I said, I just can't wait till the publications, sit back and digest it all, because it's ongoing. I know it's ongoing investigation, it's ongoing research and things like that. So that into everything is in motion. It's almost like everything is in motion, like how we see verbs. We say verbs are words of motion, and then a noun would simply be like a photographer taking a snapshot. So if you see a runner running and you take a snapshot, now you have frozen it. You have frozen time, and it's like the motion becomes a noun, an actual object. And so things are always moving and things are always becoming.
Exactly.
So it is what it is. So and that's the thing. Keper, even you said Keper means what did you just say? Life as well, and child and things like that. But and motion. But if you really think about it, motion is what evolution is and what manifestation is, and that's what some of the definitions or meanings given to even the word Keper, to manifest, to come into being, to become. What else? Evolution, to evolve, to change. So.
Hold on, I'm trying to find this one. I'm trying to find that paper so I can bring it up. Intuology, is it in here? Oh, here
Yeah,
we
I'm
go.
about to definitely say Shem Imhotep, because I gotta get up. We're supposed to be going to the lecture with Ashwa Kwesi, Elder Ashwa Kwesi in South Carolina.
Ah,
That's tomorrow. So we're gonna myself and the brother Ankh, we're gonna check him out, check out the elder, and sit back and take in the wisdom, and you know, see we can
big.
partake in the dialogue and everything like that. So I'm gonna say appreciate it, Dua, for the presentation, the invite, and
All right.
peace to everybody. And
All right. Well,
rebound.
I'm this is what I'm doing. I'm gonna close the live now, but for anybody who's up and just wanna get in the hangout, you know, we can have a private hangout on this channel. So I'm gonna share the link for those who have the hangout in the sS-md.w-nTr group on Facebook. And so I'm just going to put it out there, and then I'll just stay on. And you know, y'all want to converse and get it in, we could do that. So if you are on Facebook and on the sS-md.w-nTr group, I'm gonna put the link in there, and you know, we can go at it. So I appreciate Brother Ujawu for coming in and chiming in, and I thank you all for listening this long. I really did not intend for it to be this long. But I look forward to your feedback, and I'll talk to you later. Until next time, peace.